Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
Man, that is a catchy song. Thank you once again to Venice for singing that for us. We do appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, to another episode 9 of...
Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars.
That is right. I was testing you. I wanted to see if you remembered. I'm Matt Levitz.
I am Greg Srizavasti.
And today we are doing our Interviewing Characters episode. We are going to be talking to, or this is in the past, we have talked to. We are going to have talked to.
Or maybe you talked to and maybe I wasn't there, Matt.
Okay, fine. We're going to have talked to the Cryptkeeper from Tales from the Crypt.
John Kassir.
That's right. Barney the Dinosaur. The Muppets, because of course we have to have the Muppets. And actually I wasn't there for this. That was my brother Joel did that junket. And that was for Muppet Treasure Island.
And he's going to be here?
He is. We've invited him. And then because that's all we have programmed for this show and we don't want it to be like really, really short, we didn't want to do an hour-long episode. So we're going to end with a couple of bonus interviews. We're going to have Tim Curry, also from Muppet Treasure Island, and we're going to end with Mike Judge, who was there to talk about the Beavis and Butthead movie, Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Cool.
So before we get to that, our junket talk today, I'm going to tell my Weird Al story.
Yes, this is a personal story. We're like L&O characters. We never really give our backstories away. It's all about the episode.
Right. Well, we've got personal stuff on the webpage, but
that's true.
This story took place during the junket years, and it's kind of a peripheral story to that. So I should start out by explaining that at the time I was writing radio shows, and the radio shows were countdown shows about whatever was on the Billboard charts that week. So we did a lot of interviews with music people talking about their albums, and these were one-on-ones. And the charts kind of dictated what needed to be on the show, but there were sections of it where we could say, you know, the hot track or whatever, and I could pick whatever I wanted to play. Now, in addition to junkets and one-on-one interviews, we also did a lot of award shows. Greg, did you ever do award shows?
I did, I think, a couple of award shows, press conferences, and backstage stuff.
Yeah, they were always press conferences backstage. We did a lot of them, and we did them because we got so many music people, and we got some of the biggest stars that were hard to get one-on-ones with. You know, the biggest superstars, they wouldn't take the time for someone like us, but they would come backstage at the American Music Awards or the People's Choice Awards, the Blockbuster Awards or whatever, MTV Music Awards. So we did all that stuff, and we would set up in the press room backstage, and the people would come back one at a time, and we would do press conference style interviews. So this was 1996, and I was at the Grammy Awards, and they were bringing superstars back one after the other. So they brought Coolio back, and he was being interviewed. And the Grammys, I should say, are one of the biggest. Like the Grammys and the Emmys and the Academy Awards were the three biggest award shows. So they had the biggest press rooms. So there were probably 200 people there. I mean, it was just insane. In the back were all the cameras, and in the front were all the reporters. It was kind of a zoo and very intimidating. So we were interviewing Coolio, and I suddenly remembered that Weird Al Yankovic had covered one of his songs, Gangsta's Paradise. Weird Al had recorded Amish Paradise. It was his parody version. And I knew this because I had seen it on his webpage. The internet was still very new in 96, but I had been on Weird Al's webpage because I like him. So it wasn't common knowledge, and that album hadn't come out yet, and in fact the single hadn't even dropped. So nobody had heard it. But I knew about it. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I asked him about it? And he said something really positive, and he said, you know, it's such a funny take, and it's such an honor to have been parodied by Weird Al, and this is great, and I really love it, which is what most of them would say.
Right.
So I thought this would be great for my radio show. I could, instead of having Weird Al intro his own song saying, here's what my song is about, this would be a little twist. This would be Coolio talking about the Weird Al song, and I could use that as an intro to playing the Weird Al song. So at the Grammys, because it was so huge and cavernous, you had to get a microphone to ask a question, and they were passing a microphone around the room. So I raised my hand, and they brought the microphone to me. I was expecting a very positive answer about how great this Weird Al song was, and instead, here's what happened. Over right in front of you. Have you heard Weird Al's Amish Paradise yet?
I ain't with that.
No?
Nah, I didn't give it any sanction. You know, I think that my song was too serious. It ain't like it was Beat It. Beat It was a fun song, a party song, but I think Gangsta Paradise represented something more than that, and I really, honestly and truly don't appreciate him desecrating the song like that. I think he's wrong for that because his record company asked for my permission, and I said no. But they did it anyway. I couldn't stop them, so, more power to them. I hope they sell a lot of records. Just stay away from me.
Whoa, that really was not the answer I was expecting from Coolio.
Well, and it wasn't the answer I was expecting either. I really thought he was going to say something nice. This completely took me by surprise. And what happened next was everybody just got really excited in the whole room, like, oh my God, that's the big story of the night. And there was this flurry of activity. I think that was the last question. People started going to their phones, calling their radio stations and saying, here's what just happened. The rest of the day, and we were there, the Grammys are a marathon. We were there for 7-8 hours. The rest of the day, everyone just kept coming up to me going, thank you so much for asking that question. That was so great. That's going to be our lead story on the news tonight. And sure enough, by the time I got home, this story was everywhere. It was on every channel. Everyone was talking about this. It just exploded. And I felt terrible. This was not what I wanted at all. And in fact, the next morning, I called up his publicist, Cheryl Northrup, who I knew because I had interviewed Weird Al. And I called her up and I said, I'm so sorry. I explained to her what happened. And she was just crazed, going, oh my God, that was you? Oh God. And you could hear, like, behind her, the phone was ringing off the hook. There was just, everything was going on. Everyone wanted Al's response. And she's like, I can't talk. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Just, all right, bye. I really felt bad. And it did become a big thing. And he did have to issue a response. And it was weird for a little while. And it sort of blew over. But years later, after I'd almost even forgotten about this, VH1 did a Behind the Music on Weird Al Yankovic. And as soon as I saw that was programmed, I just went, oh no. I knew it was going to be a part of it because the show always had to have a low point. It always had to be, things were going really, really well, and then this happened. But they rose back up, and that's what every show was. And they had to find what that thing was. And Weird Al Yankovic doesn't have a lot of controversy. It's been a pretty steady rise, and everything's been pretty positive for him.
Right.
So I just knew they were going to latch onto this. And sure enough, they did. This was their big crisis moment. And if you watch that episode, they air it with my voice asking the question. So that's one of my little 15 minutes of fame. This moment that I feel absolutely horrible about was part of VH1 Behind the Music, Weird Al Yankovic.
That would have been cool if you got in touch with Weird Al himself. And
I have not talked to him. We actually have a mutual friend, the band Venice, who perform our theme song. They do a benefit concert every year at Santa Monica High School. It's their foundation called Artists for the Arts, and they raise money for the arts programs at Santa Monica High School and at some of the other schools in the area. And they get guest headliners every year. And a couple of years ago, they got Weird Al Yankovic to come in and do the show. So I was thinking I would probably go and head backstage and hang with my friends and tell them this story, but I forget what happened. I didn't wind up there.
Oh.
So I don't know. Maybe someone will play this podcast for him. Maybe he'll hear it. So, Al, if you're out there, I'm sorry.
What about Coolio, man? I'm just kidding.
Well, I think Coolio apologized for it.
Yeah.
Here's the important thing that I want to say, though. This would have happened anyway. Coolio wanted to say this. He was ready to say it. The first person who asked it, this was the answer he was going to give.
Yep.
So it might have been Rolling Stone magazine. It might have been
Spin.
At some point, he was going to say this.
Yeah.
But that would have been in one place. The fact that it happened at the Grammy Awards in front of 200 reporters was what made it a huge story because it was everywhere, and that was entirely my fault.
Yeah, Coolio's probably thankful that you actually asked that question. You got it to so many outlets, and
Yeah, but wasn't so great for me.
anyways, great question, man. Great story, actually.
So that's my Weird Al story. And now I think we can move on to the show,
The show.
which is interviewing characters. Now, sometimes when an animated movie was going to come out involving established characters such as like a SpongeBob movie or a Toy Story sequel or a Bugs Bunny film like Space Jam or Looney Tunes Back in Action, the studios would write an interview script and the voice actors would voice it, the animators would animate it, and then the TV journalists would come into their hotel room one at a time, sit in front of a camera, and read their part of the script from a teleprompter, usually with a cartoony backdrop behind them. And then they would each go home with a tape of themselves asking questions and another tape of the animated characters giving their answers. And then the two of them could be edited together to assemble the quote-unquote interview.
Right.
The whole thing was scripted, and they were saying their lines, and the answers were already created for them. This is not what happened in the radio room. Because we were audio only, nothing had to be pre-animated for us. You could just put us in a room with a voice actor pretending to be the character, and then a real interview could happen. And when we got those, it was pretty special. I remember at a TCA, I interviewed Hank Azaria once, and we're not going to feature this on the show because it was a one-on-one, and we're not doing those. But he did a lot of his Simpsons characters, and I got to interview them, and that was fun. Wow. And then a little bit later, after I stopped being a junketeer and I started to become a producer-editor, we did the electronic press kit for This Is Spinal Tap when it came out on DVD. And we got to interview those guys in character and in costume. And the stuff was so good. It's so funny. I really love those pieces. Unfortunately, something else we can't share. Actually, I couldn't share that one if I wanted to because MGM owns it.
Oh, wow.
But we do have the Cryptkeeper. Now, this interview took place December 11th, 1994, and it was for the movie Tales from the Crypt Presents Demon Knight. For those of you who never saw the HBO show, Greg, how would you describe the Cryptkeeper?
Just a scary, creepy-looking puppet with a crazy voice. It's a memorable voice. I can't do the voice.
Oh, I wouldn't want you to.
John, thank you for that insult. John Cassier, would probably does the voice very well throughout the interview, which is great. But he's pretty much the Rod Serling, the modern day version at that time of Rod Serling.
He was the host of the HBO show Tales from the Crypt, and he would intro each episode, and then he would do a little thing at the end too, always with lots of puns. The character really loved puns, and he would laugh hysterically at them. The show was based on the comic strip, and the Cryptkeeper was the host of the comic strip as well, so that's where it came from. They were just keeping that element of Tales from the Crypt from the comics to the show. But he was very popular. People really liked the Cryptkeeper. And so when the movie was coming out, rather than having us talk to the actors, they wanted us to talk to the Cryptkeeper, which I was excited about. I thought, what a cool thing. How fun this will be. So here's what I remember about this junket. They could very easily have gotten away with just sitting us at a table with John Cassier. And he could have done the voice, and nobody would have known the difference. But they had everything set up because they were also doing TV interviews. So they had the puppet, and they had the puppeteers there. And so they figured, we'll just do the same thing for the radio group. So we interviewed the puppet. They had the puppet set up at the front of the room behind a large podium that was hiding the puppeteers, and they were operating him live. They were gesturing with his hands, and they were trying to match the mouth movements to what was being said, which wasn't perfect because there was no script to follow. We were all just winging it. But all things considered, I think they did a really good job. Again, John Cassier, who did the voice, he was sitting in the corner with a microphone, kind of out of our sight line, but he was there. We saw him. And he had pages of notes in front of him. And again, this wasn't a script because they had no idea what questions we were going to ask. We were given carte blanche to ask whatever we wanted. But the writers of the show had given him a list of puns to try to work into what he said, try to work into his dialogue, based on the questions that they anticipated us asking. So these were just kind of suggestions, try to say these things. And he did. You'll hear them. He worked some puns in there that he didn't come up with on the spot. He's going from his list. So there had been some prep work done, but the bulk of what he answered was improvised. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, he did a good job. He stayed as this character. This interview runs about 14 minutes, and it's pretty fun.
It is fun, and I was surprised that he didn't break character. It was hard I thought he would just eventually midstream just peter out.
He's a professional. I didn't expect that.
Oh.
But it was fun, and you just have to remember it was a bunch of Junketeers. It was kind of press conference style. It wasn't at a table, so we were sitting in rows of chairs, and we're talking to a puppet. It was fun, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. So here is the Cryptkeeper.
Okay.
Very happy to have you here today. Are we rolling? Sound? Rolling? Everybody happy? Good. So, I've called you here today to tell you about my movie. Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Night, premiering on screens all across the country, January 13th. That's Friday the 13th, 1995. So, what would you like to know about the film, kiddies?
How about a little about the storyline? How do you come into play in it?
Well, as you may have seen on the posters, Ernest Dickerson's name has been mentioned a number of times as the director. Not true. I directed this film, as you will find out while seeing it. I, of course, had the dubious job of hosting the movies, as I do on the series and did in the comic books. But it was not that hard of a gig, really. I enjoyed myself. We had wonderful stars. We had Billy Zane, Bill Sadler, Jada Pinkett, a number of wonderful character actors. Our movie is about good versus evil, a race through time. It's about demons versus man. It's madness, mayhem, gore, and of course, there's a little sex thrown in. That's all I'd really like to say about it right now. I won't want to spoil the movie for anyone. Anyone else?
Now that you've moved up into film, you think you'll go back to television again?
Well, as you know, I cut my teeth on the small screen as far as the media goes, and I never like to look a gift horse in the mouth. But the big screen is now my venue. I have 2 more major motion pictures coming along, and you're going to want to catch them as well. But if the opportunity arises, I will take some time to, out of my busy schedule, to do a little television here and there. Maybe a few commercials. After all, I do like to make money. Don't believe what they say, boys and ghouls. You can take it with you. Okay, next.
What are your thoughts and feelings right now about the new film? You excited? You nervous? What's going on in your mind?
Oh, well, I have a few bats in my tummy, but we're having a good time promoting this film. I've seen my cut. They gave me final cut, as you know, and I'm just pleased as punch. Some of the test audiences have gone absolutely wild over it, and I just couldn't be more pleased. We're going to have a big scremiere. We're going to close down a certain part of Hollywood, and all the stars will be there. I hope you all can join me. So as you can see, I'm very excited.
One of the stars you mentioned, Jada Pinkett, has already been in 2 films this year. And she's getting quite a fan following. What can you tell us about her performance and your experience working with her?
Oh, well, she is hot. Let's just put it this way. If I had skin, she'd be under it. She's absolutely wonderful in this film. She gets to play a heroine, which is a really good role for her. She absolutely steals the scream. Next.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Maybe.
How are you able to maintain that good look through all these years?
Oh, well, thank you. You know, I always have thought of myself as a bleeding man type. I mean, check out these baby blues. These high cheekbones, exposed as they may be. But, I'm sort of a Robert Redford, Gory Cooper type. And I've just aged well. That and a good embalmer.
What do you think is the secret of the success of Tales of the Crypt? I think you just taped your 80th episode, I'm told.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. The secret of the success of Tales from the Crypt. Me! No, of course. It's death. It's fun. It's tongue-in-cheek horror at its finest. I mean, if you want dead, you come to me. You have Jack Nicholson playing Wolf, Tom Cruise, all those pretty boys. But if you want death, played the way death should be played, you come to me.
So how much of the merchandising are we going to see that's direct from the movie? I know there's a lot of merchandise out right now with you in it. Are we going to see little Jada Pinkett dolls too?
That's an idea. Ooh. Ooh. I don't know. I guess you have to get permission for that sort of thing. We do have the Tales from the Crypt doll. Oh, and you're going to want to catch my Christmas album. It's a great stocking stuffer. Have yourself a scary little Christmas. It's available in record stores now. As far as the movie memorabilia, we'll just have to wait and see. We do have 3 movies, so I'm sure that opens the door for a lot of great horror memorabilia.
I saw your doll at Toys R Us earlier this week. Is it, in your opinion, have they captured the essence, the magnetism, the hunkish quality of the Cryptkeeper?
Well, I'd have to say there's nothing like the real thing. But as for the kiddies, a little doll that has my voice, my face, and my name on it, you can't go wrong. They're selling like hotcakes. They can't keep them in the stores.
What's your opinion of the Saturday morning cartoon? The fact that you've been kind of toned down and homogenized for the kids. Does that bother you?
Well, there's always the show for those who like to have it in its full form. Those who like to really have the hair stand up on the back of their necks. I was really against having a different image but my own on there. But now that I've seen the cartoon, I think it's absolute fun. In the true spirit of Tales from the Crypt. That's me up there. In cartoon image, of course. A little toned down for a little more peaked, lightweight. Chumps! What are they talking about? Doing my image like... I'm sorry. I've been warned about this. Morality clauses and all that. Oh, well. Next!
Jim Carrey's making $7 million a picture now, and now you're gonna have a big film. Is your salary gonna bump up now these days?
Could be. I think that I've warranted it. I mean, after all, I have been around a lot longer than Carrey. I mean, Mask was just me looking green. I thought to myself, oh, what a posure. Mask. Bull hockey. Well, he is kind of a friend. I really shouldn't, talk derivatively about him, but... I guess there's room for everybody in this business, isn't there? Dead or alive.
How do you spend your spare time when you're not working?
Well, my favorite thing to do is to pop up some maggot corn, put it in the little heat popper, dig up one of my old flames. I've been seeing a few of my old dead starlets lately. I don't want to mention any names, Marilyn Monroe, but that, to me, is a perfect evening, sitting in front of the fire, or on the fire, watching my favorite Tales from the Crypt episodes.
Which ones are your favorites?
Well, the first 3 were very good. I mean, the one where the executioner takes it upon himself as a vigilante to do in the people one at a time, directed by Walter Hill. That one is absolutely terrific. And I get to electrocute myself in the end. Absolutely fabulous. They're all good. I do love a good horror story where somebody does somebody else in, but he gets it in the end. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I've had a very long day, and I've got an even longer night ahead of me, and my life goes on and on. But please, please feel free to ask anything.
Before you got into this, what was your life or death like before you became a television star?
Well, as you know, the stories that I created way back in the 1950s and 60s and published by William Gaines started my career as the Cryptkeeper. I've been dead for about 120 years now, and as you may have seen in the one episode, which is my absolute favorite episode, is about Mummy and Daddy, where Daddy worked as a freak in the sideshow, and I was born. And that is some of my backstory. I, of course, traveled with some Shakespearean acting troupes, doing plays like A Midsummer's Night's Scream, this type of thing. I like to remain versatile. You know what I mean? Life, death. It can all be an awakening experience, don't you think? Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about Robert De Niro's Frankenstein?
Amateur! Amateur! You want death? I told you. You come to me.
Okay. Got it.
What are the next few films, next few Tales from the Crypt films planned?
Well, let's see. The first one is in production now. We're hoping to release that by the summer or maybe Halloween next year, and the next one the following year. So we have plenty of fun, mayhem, madness, murder, all in store for you. You have a lot to look forward to. I don't want to reveal the storylines because I wouldn't want to ruin it for all the kiddies out there. The second one is called Fat Tuesday, and that's all that I'll say. But it will be in the true Tales from the Crypt spirit, because as you know, these are not half-hour short anthology episodes like the series. No, these are full 90-minute, full-length features directed by yours truly, starring yours truly, and enjoyed forever by yours truly. Well, thank you, kiddies. And if that's all, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you. I hope you can all make it to the Scrumiere January 13th. That's Friday the 13th. On many, many cryptplexes near you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Now get out!
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that was the Cryptkeeper, or John Kasser. As you heard at the very end, he became himself again. He used his real voice at the very end just saying thank you to everybody. Now, I'm sorry that this isn't on the tape, but I do remember very clearly I got a huge laugh from the room when, after the interview was over and we had packed up our bags, we were getting ready to leave, I walked over to that wrinkled puppet, the skinny skeletal figure that was supposed to be hundreds of years old, and I said to it, "Good luck with the rest of the tour, Mr. Richards."
Nice.
A little Rolling Stones dig.
Very cool.
And what's hilarious is 28 years later, the joke still works.
The joke still works. They're both still alive.
He still looks like the Cryptkeeper.
I had no idea that John Kassir, I was looking up his bio, was married to Dexter actress Julie Benz from 1998 to 2007. I've interviewed Julie Benz over the years.
I didn't know that.
Interesting. Little factoid.
I remember him from the musical version of Reefer Madness.
Oh, okay.
Which was a made-for-cable movie. I think it was Showtime, but I can't remember. But it's on DVD. You can check it out. It's pretty fun.
Well, aside from the Cryptkeeper stuff, Kassir's had a solid career in voice acting and everything. So he's had a career post-Demon Knight as well.
Well, for example, like what's he worked on?
Yeah, I mean, most recently in 2016, he wasn't the dragon in Pete's Dragon, but he's credited as Elliot vocals. He was also credited as additional voices in 2016's The Secret Life of Pets. That was just in the year 2016. And, he's been in video games. He was in Skylanders, Superchargers, and Lego Jurassic World. So he's had his share of his voice in the gaming world as well as the cinematic world.
Great.
So yeah, he played Scrooge McDuck in a Mickey Mouse TV short. Ran from 2016 to 2018, and he was also additional voices in last year's The Emoji Movie. So was not an emoji per se, yes. So yeah, he's had a solid career since the Cryptkeeper
time.
So
nothing as high profile as the Cryptkeeper, but that character I think is still pretty highly thought of, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see it again.
A character who's really highly thought of, I think, before we get... do you still have some more postscript stuff on Kassir?
Just one more thing.
Yeah.
The other memory that I have is that with permission from Universal's publicist, Roz Stevenson, she allowed me to bring Erica along, the woman I was married to at the time. She was a huge fan of Tales from the Crypt. And normally you would never bring a spouse or a date to a junket because that's unprofessional.
Yes.
You would never see dates sitting in a corner of the room. I mean, it just wasn't done. But this one was different. And, we were going to be interviewing a puppet and it was just the one interview. And she said it was fine. So she sat quietly next to me having a great time. And
oh, that's great.
It's a nice memory. I'm glad that I was able to bring her along to that.
Nice.
So the next interview is Barney.
It's probably our shortest one, right?
Well, yeah. I do want to say to everyone out there who's getting ready to fast forward because they don't want to hear this, it's only 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You can handle that. And we've got an interesting conversation to have.
But can you handle the Barney interview with the context? You were saying the interesting conversation.
Well, the interesting conversation is going to come afterwards.
Oh, okay.
So this interview was for the release of the movie Barney's Great Adventure. One of those classics, I think, that we all come back and watch it again every year. Don't you, Greg?
Yes. Barney continues to have great adventures.
Yeah, the character isn't around anymore. I think the show's off, isn't it?
It has to be off.
I believe it's gone, but it was huge in its day. My God,
huge.
Everybody knew Barney. You either loved the show or you absolutely loathed it. And I remember in my teenage years, it was just, that's the worst thing ever. Just everybody had jokes about Barney. Everybody hated it. But it was popular. They made this movie, and they held this, I don't know whether you could call it a junket. It was just a big room, and everyone was invited to bring their kids along, so they had to do the whole production because they weren't going to reveal the magic trick when there were kids there. They weren't going to ruin the illusion. Kids believe that Barney is real, and so they had to make Barney real. So the guy in the costume came out, and he jumped around while the guy who did the voice was hiding in another room, watching us through a monitor and talking into a microphone. And the speaker that was receiving his voice and amplifying it out, it was mounted inside the Barney costume so that it would sound like the voice was coming from Barney. But I remember that the speaker was mounted closer to the character's stomach than his mouth, so it gave the creepy impression that there must have been two Barneys and one of them had eaten the other. But I don't think anyone else noticed. The kids were pretty ecstatic. Now, the reason that this interview was so short is, if I remember right, none of the other radio junketeers showed up. I mean, I think they must have looked at the invitation and went, yeah, right.
Wow.
So it was just me and about a dozen other journalists that I didn't recognize. And nobody else really asked any questions. One or two did, but it was mostly me. So I did the best that I could with it, but it really wasn't that much. I hadn't seen the movie. They didn't bother screening it for us, which was fine. I was perfectly happy not seeing that movie. But I made up a couple of things on the spot. And then the last few questions that you're going to hear, some of the radio stations that we were affiliated with had put the word out that we were going to be doing this interview, and they asked if any of their young listeners had any questions for Barney. And so they acquired a list of questions from kids, and I was given that list, and so I asked those questions. So you have to keep in mind when you listen to this that I am not having a conversation with a person who's doing a character voice, you know, sitting in front of me so that we're looking into each other's faces and having a human connection, which is the way most junkets worked. What I'm doing here is directing my questions to a guy in a dinosaur costume who is hopping back and forth and waving his arms, while the questions to my answers are amplified back at me just a little bit too loud from a spot in the middle of his chest.
Well, we have a visitor. I wonder who that is.
Hi there.
Barney the Dinosaur.
Hi, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. Hi, Cheryl. Oh,
On
this is
your
great.
front door, John.
Hello there. How is everybody today? Oh, boy. Does anyone have any questions?
Barney, what do you think of Jurassic Park?
Oh, Jurassic Park? Well, you know, some of my relatives misbehave every once in a while, but I still love them. Oh, well, when I was a little itty-bitty dinosaur, I just loved going to the movies. Oh, they were so exciting. I mean, when the lights go down and it's almost like a beautiful starry night, and then the picture comes on. It's so big and bright. It was so exciting. Oh, it looked like fun.
And how was it? Was it fun?
Oh, absolutely. We had a great time making this movie. We got to go on all kinds of adventures. In my spare time? Well, I like to keep in shape, so I exercise. And of course, I always eat right. I have to do these things because, you know, I do my own stunts.
Barney, what do you eat?
Oh, well, lots of veggies, of course. I love them. But every once in a while, I just have to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Do you have any favorite movie snacks?
Movie snacks? Oh, popcorn is great. Oh, popcorn. It's so yummy. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
When you throw your throw your arm and point with your finger and toy things become real. How do you do that?
Well, I always use my imagination, of course. That's the greatest way to do it.
Alexandria also wants to know how you got the spots on your back and do they glow in the dark?
Oh, well, they don't glow in the dark, but I was born that way.
How old are you? Do you have parents, and what do they think of you being on TV?
Oh, how old am I? Let's see. Oh, gosh, I'm, it's about 200 million years old, maybe? And, well, you know, I'm so old I've forgotten when my birthday is. And everybody has parents. Oh, they love me very much. I think they're very proud of me. I'm very proud of them.
Okay. Thanks, Barney.
Sure.
Okay, so that was Barney. Again, wasn't too bad, right? Just 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes, not so bad.
Pretty quick. And full disclosure, there is actually about 10 minutes more on this tape, but it's all Barney posing for pictures with the kids and making small talk with them, and it's pretty boring, so I just edited it out. There's really no reason we need to sit here and listen to that.
Did you get your picture taken with Barney?
I did get my picture taken with Barney, and if you go searching through our webpage at mattandgregpodcast.com, take a look, you'll find it.
Oh, wow.
It's not too hidden in there. I think it's on my bio page. I don't remember. It's pretty prominently placed. You'll see me with Barney.
Matt, the things you dig up for the show, I had no idea. I remember Barney from the 90s I never had kids or nephews or nieces around that time.
That you know of.
That I know of. Nieces and thank you. That's my private life. Don't mention that.
Oh.
Nieces and nephews that I know of or kids that I know of. But I'd see Barney now and again. I was assuming once you see a kid's show, it's embedded in your mind for years and years, and it was great having this little Barney callback with you. But that piece that you sent me regarding actor David Joyner.
Yes, before you say, I want to point out the voice of the character was provided by an actor named Bob West, and the guy in the costume was David Joyner. So the next part of the show is a little bit not safe for work. If you have kids in the car who were excited about listening to Barney, maybe hit fast forward a little bit. This next part is not for kids.
So listeners, if you ever wondered whatever happened to the person who played Barney, here's the Vice story headline on Vice.com. You can see.
Giving credit where it's due.
Yes.
We pulled most of this information from Vice.com, and you can look this article up yourself too. And in fact, we recommend that you do.
Yes. And the headline for the Vice article is, "The guy who played Barney the Dinosaur now runs a tantric sex business." The subheadline to this is, he being David Joyner, started his current practice in 2004 and finds clients any number of ways, from word of mouth to converting women he's met on Tinder into believers. So,
right. To further illustrate what we're talking about here, this is not a class where partners are focused on each other and he's walking around giving pointers. These are women that he meets on Tinder, and he turns them into clients where he has intercourse with them, and they pay him for that because he is teaching them tantric sex. Once again, this is Barney.
Right. These tantric sessions last from 3 to 4 hours, and they cost $350 in, I'm assuming, real world money. I'm not thinking Barney chips, so to speak.
He loves them. They love him. They're a happy family.
They're happy. Look, I just can't imagine this. Okay, also quoting from the Vice article, obviously there's a ritual bath, chakra balancing. I'm all for this. A massage, that's good. That's fine. Gets out the toxins. But here, also on the menu, quote, cosmic, mind-blowing orgasms.
Exactly like the kind that the kids had watching Barney.
I was going to say, my joke was, which I've never had, maybe I should call David Joyner. But obviously, that's a different career choice for Mr. Joyner.
His practice is controversial.
Right.
Later on in this interview, there's another woman who is well-versed in tantric sex and says you don't have to have intercourse with your students in order to teach this. So what he's doing is not the usual thing.
Aside from the tantric sex, though, to his credit, he's actually had a solid career since ending his Barney run at around circa 2000.
You mean as an actor?
As an actor.
Okay.
Not as a well, I'm sure he's probably doing well in the tantric sex business.
I'm sure
but
he is.
Barney and Friends ended 2000.
He and his big purple dinosaur are doing quite well for themselves.
Yes. But, he's been credited recently. He was in the TV series Animal Kingdom. He was in the pilot. He was also in Veep for one episode. He's been in Shameless for one episode. So I don't know if these are walk-on parts or maybe, who knows, maybe they're speaking parts. And he was also in a 13-episode run of this show called According to Him and Her. So, I mean, he was in Southland. I love Southland.
Okay.
TV series set in L.A. So he played a detective on one episode.
We would not recognize him as Barney because why would we? He was in a suit the whole time. His head was hidden. So, I mean, he could be in anything and we wouldn't know.
So that's all we've got on David Joyner. It'd be interesting.
Which is plenty.
Which is plenty. But 2.5 minutes of, I guess, Barney goes a long way, Matt Levitz.
Yeah.
So
next up, we have one that I'm super excited about because I am a huge fan of the Muppets. Are you as well?
I was a fan when I was a kid when the TV series was on, but as I grew up, I became more into. Animation was not, or puppetry and that stuff was not a big thing for me.
Now, the Muppets are not exclusively for kids. It's not really like a kiddie show. The humor was very sophisticated and continues to be.
Right. Like the Henson world was really over my head. I mean, I still haven't seen The Dark Crystal.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about Labyrinth?
What did you call me? No, I haven't even seen Labyrinth.
Wow.
See?
Labyrinth is great.
Okay, Labyrinth is a lot of people think The Dark Crystal is a classic as well. So I'm missing a lot of stuff with the Henson world.
Well, the nice thing about this episode is they actually participated in a junket for Muppet Treasure Island, which was in 1996, and Frank Oz was there to perform Miss Piggy, and Steve Whitmore did Kermit the Frog. And then also sitting with them was Brian Henson, the director, who, of course, is Jim Henson's son.
Yeah.
So to give you a little background, in this film, Frank Oz provided the voices for 4 of the classic characters that he had created with Jim Henson back in the 1970s. He did Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Sam the Eagle, and Animal. But for this film, he didn't do any of the puppetry, because by 1996, Oz was starting to drift away from the Muppet world, and he was off directing movies instead. And in fact, during the filming of Muppet Treasure Island, he was off directing the Kevin Kline comedy In and Out. So his characters on this film were performed on set by Kevin Clash. And that's a name you might know because Kevin Clash performed and voiced Elmo from 1985 to 2012. So the Elmo guy was doing Miss Piggy and Fozzie Bear and all of Frank Oz's characters in the movie and doing a temp voice. And then what happened was after the movie was done, Frank Oz came in and redubbed the characters' voice parts in the studio. So in the final movie, you're hearing Frank Oz's voice, but it's Kevin Clash's hand inside the puppet. So really, Frank Oz only worked on this film for a few days, but he did come in and work the Miss Piggy puppet at the junket, which is
That's pretty awesome, right?
Well,
Yeah.
of course, because
A lot of dedication.
he created this character. I mean,
Yeah.
he is the original guy. He hasn't done it in a lot of years, but I mean, to sit at a table with Frank Oz doing Miss Piggy is pretty legendary. Steve Whitmire, who did Kermit at this junket, he's been involved with the Muppets since 1978. And he took over the roles of Kermit the Frog and Ernie right after Jim Henson died in 1990. So he had done it immediately after Jim. He was the second guy. And he's done it for years and years and years, right up until very recently when he had a pretty ugly falling out with the Muppets, and they parted ways after 39 years of working together.
My goodness.
So...
Wow.
It's not, again, just like with the Harold Ramis and Bill Murray thing in the last episode, we're not going to get into the reasons why. You can jump onto the internet and find out yourself. And it's another one of those where there's 2 versions to the story, depending on who you talk to. But we don't really want to get into that. We're more about don't cry because it's over, laugh because it happened.
Right.
You
And
know?
it's great. It's also great to hear Brian Henson talk about carrying on his father's legacy, the Muppet legacy, as a director. So we're also going to get a little taste of that in this interview as well.
Yep. All right. So now this Muppet interview, I actually wasn't there. And Greg, you weren't there either, right?
I wasn't there.
All right. So unfortunately, I mean, we're not going to be able to talk about this from any kind of first-person perspective because neither of us were there.
Right. I wish we had someone.
Hi, everybody.
Wow.
A little late on the cue there.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, my God, Joel, I had no idea. When did you get here? I'm like every character in every horror movie. I have no peripheral vision. You snuck right up on me. Anyway, everyone, this is my brother Joel. And Joel worked for us for how long? A couple of years, I guess, in the 90s?
Yeah, 3 years or so.
Yeah, and so we sent you out on a lot of junkets.
Yes,
and
you did.
You happened to be the guy who did this one.
Coincidentally, yes.
So what do you remember about interviewing the Muppets?
Oh, my God. It was such a bizarre experience. What I remember more than anything was how quickly it transformed from talking to Muppeteers who happened to be operating their Muppets to just talking to the Muppets. Frank Oz was there operating Miss Piggy, and his head was down and his eyes were closed and he was deep in focused concentration, but he essentially didn't move. All the mics were pointed at him, but you were talking to Miss Piggy. And it just became a very easy transition to no longer talking to Frank as Miss Piggy into just talking to her. And afterwards, it felt a little bizarre to have done that, but at the same time, it's not like you were any less starstruck talking to her than you were talking to him. It was just a different star you were talking to.
I've heard that from actors who have been on Sesame Street, who have been on The Muppet Show, where the job is to talk to the puppets and not to the puppeteers. And you hear that all the time about just how easy that is. And part of that was that they ad-lib all the time in character. Mm-hmm. So the whole time that you're filming, they are the character and you're interacting with that. And I guess that just makes it easy to forget the surrealness of what's going on.
That's exactly how it was, yeah.
So wait, were you intimidated even though these are really inanimate characters?
As I say, it did not feel like talking to an inanimate object. It felt like
Right.
talking to a pig.
Well, how about the starstruck element, though? Because we were doing junkets for a lot of years, and there were people that we would get excited about and other people that were just actors. You know, we were all professionals working together. But, you know, sometimes you would get really excited. Was this one of those times?
Oh, without a doubt. Absolutely. This was the freaking Muppets.
All right, cool. So we've got a couple of things to talk about with this interview, but Joel, thank you for swinging by. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Joel. The check's in the mail. Is there a check, Matt? Okay.
Now, before we get to the junket, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. In all of the junkets, we never wanted the interviewees to call us by name, right? Because that would kill the bite. Because none of us were presences on our own shows. The sound bites that we pulled from the interviews existed by themselves. So if I was talking to someone and they said, you know, right in the middle of it, "So you see, Matt," then it wouldn't make any sense on the show because on the hundreds of radio stations across the country where the soundbite was airing, there was no Matt.
Yep.
So we would have to cut that out if they said that, and that was kind of a pain. Normally, that wouldn't happen, but in this interview, it happened a lot, and it was deliberate. The performers were trying to create a connection. The thing is, in a TV interview, that would be great. If it's one-on-one and the interviewer is on camera and is meant to be a presence in this interview, then that's great. It's great television. But it wasn't so great in the radio room. I wasn't there, but nobody pointed it out to them, "Please don't do that." They just went along with it. So you're going to hear a lot of calling people by name. Just understand that that made it a huge mess trying to use this stuff later. So that was one of the things I wanted to say. I also wanted to point out, again, that this is not scripted. The interviewers were not told what to ask. They were asking their own questions, and the Muppeteers were just improvising answers. That's actually one of the skill sets of Muppeteers. They are great improvisers. They improvise all the time. A lot of what you see when you watch the Muppets are lines that were improvised. They'd come up with stuff. And if you watch the DVDs and you watch the bonus features, you'll see that they stay in character even between takes, and they're saying hilarious things even when the cameras are rolling. Mm-hmm. So this is easy for them. And in fact, they practice this skill at a show called Puppet Up. And I urge everyone to go onto YouTube and run a search on Puppet Up, and you will see this live improv show that the Muppet cast does. They're not allowed to use the Disney-owned characters. They had to create a bunch of new ones for this. But they perform these shows in LA, and sometimes they tour with it. And it's really hilarious. It's a true improv show where everything is a sketch built on the spot from audience suggestions. And they're just performing with Muppets. And they've got a camera, so you're watching the screen up on the wall, but you can also watch them doing it. And they're just brilliant improvisers. And you're going to hear that in this interview because Frank Oz as Miss Piggy and Steve Whitmore as Kermit the Frog are just hilarious, riffing off the top of their heads. Anyways, I think there's been an awful lot of us talking and not nearly enough Muppets. So I think it's time to get to it.
Let's get to it.
It's time to get things started on The Muppet Show tonight.
Do you want to?
Impressed, aren't you?
Because we have to lean. You have to lean in.
I don't care.
When you have a comment to make, do you want to? It's
sure,
easy for me to lean in. Why don't you get? Why don't you
What?
swap with me? Because it's easy for me.
All right.
So it's easy for me to.
Okay. Excuse me. Morning.
Go ahead, spit it out. Spit it out.
So, how do you keep up with all the trends on your hair?
Well, I don't actually have hair. Oh, you mean her? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have various hairdresser lackeys who do that for me.
She has lots of wigs with ear holes. Morning.
Is this the way it's going to go?
Good morning.
Fine. No, I have excuse me. I'm sorry.
I would like to know, you guys have been on the scene.
What's your name?
I'm Jeff.
Hello, Jeffy.
Hi, Jeff.
Good morning.
Morning.
And, you guys have been, really prominent world figures for over 2 decades now. What I want to know is how do you deal with the success? How do you hold on to the inner tadpole, the inner piglet inside of you?
You want to take that one?
Not particularly, no.
Well, I'm a very simple frog. When I'm not working, I go back to the swamp and I hang out there. I don't let the Hollywood thing get to me, and I don't go to a lot of those Hollywood parties, I just live a very simple life.
Mm-hmm. As from what pigs handle success very well. It's kind of inbred.
And
Interesting terminology.
Do you get this attack feeling from the frog?
No. It's just I just
Come here, we're just trying to be nice here now.
Okay.
Miss Piggy, also a very serious moment in the film actually was where you revealed some of your issues about codependent relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could talk some more about that. Has that been a problem for you? Have you been to meetings about that?
No meetings. No, I'm aware of it. I'm certainly aware of it. And fortunately, Kermie and moi have a more independent relationship. And he's certainly always he runs after me a great deal. But I try to be my own woman.
Wait a minute. Well, never mind.
How challenging is it, though, to
What's your name, dear?
I'm Cameron. Good morning.
Hi, Cameron.
How are you? With
What's so funny, Cammy? I want to share with the class.
This is just a wonderful moment to be in the presence of such celebrity and beauty.
I'm sorry? Say it again? I couldn't hear you.
I would like to follow up on Jeff.
I like what you said. I'd like to hear it again.
In the presence
so
of
far, Brian's been pretty boring, hasn't he?
I think I'm gonna have nothing to say. I don't think.
But with the idea of relationships in mind,
yes. You having problems? Are you?
No, but I'm wondering if there are ever any challenges that come between you and Kermit being involved off screen and then having to play these romantic roles on screen.
Yes, there are challenges. Fortunately, we are both mature people. We can handle these things. There's no dependency. There's no codependency.
True.
There's no sense of needing each other for security.
True.
We both have separate lives. Oh, do you have the key to our room, dear?
No, it's in your pocket.
Fine.
What about the scene where you're hanging off the cliff? Was that really you, and were you frightened?
Yes.
Yes, it was moi. No, moi was not frightened because we had many excellent people prepare the thing for us. It was fine. I wanted to do moi's own stunts.
Yeah, we always do our own stunts. That's one of the things we do. And we had lots of great guys who made sure the rope wasn't going to break. We had lots of pads.
Actually, what I was frightened of mostly was I had not actually worked my thighs that morning. And they might have been just a little teensy bit large.
Yeah, that can be frightening.
Now, Treasure Island is, of course, one of the enduring...
Candy, yes, dear.
Yes.
Sorry.
One of the enduring classics of literature and has been enjoyed by young people
many pigs, yes.
for generations. What is it about this interpretation of Treasure Island that's going to excite young viewers, and what will they see when they
I think Brian can answer that one.
I think so. Yeah, that sounds like a Brian
Let's just sit down and listen to Brian.
Sure. Take it away.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, let's see. When we decided on Treasure Island, we were looking for a more epic adventure movie for the Muppets to do, and something that was a lot more action-oriented. And Treasure Island felt really good, and there were some real nice opportunities to cast the Muppet characters into this story. That's really why we chose it. We were looking to make something that was a lot more comedic than Christmas Carol as well. So there's a lot more comedy in this one. In terms of this telling versus the other classic tellings, obviously this is the least faithful.
But is this sort of a direction in terms of, because in the past, like with the Muppets Take Manhattan and those were completely original without a hint of literature.
Well,
back off, lady. No literature?
Well, no, that's a bad choice of words too.
Fine. What's your name, dear?
Mari.
Mari, fine. Okay, I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Well, the first three films were taking the Muppets and putting them in our world, the modern day world. So we were looking for a very different place to put them that would take the characters in a different direction, and Christmas Carol worked very well, and we wanted to continue in that vein. So we made Treasure Island. I don't know if the next one, we weren't necessarily doing it to tell classic tales. It was more that we were looking for that classic genre. It was that we wanted to be in the Dickens world, and we wanted to be in the Robert Louis Stevenson world.
I think you must say, Brian, dear, also that remember that Robert Louis Stevenson, before the first draft was written, he had conceptualized this as a story for pigs.
Wait a minute. You mean we did what?
Yes, before the first draft, when he sat around to do the thing that writers do, you know?
Yeah.
Sit and think. It was meant to be for pigs, an all-pig version.
I see. Okay.
Basically, moi is what's left of that.
Well, with that in mind for Kermit and Miss Piggy.
Was that Cammy?
That's Cammy.
Fine.
You mentioned Christmas Carol. This is another big costume drama, but this one has all those action adventure elements? Was it fun to dress up in those costumes and do the sword fighting and the swashbuckling?
Oh, listen.
For Kermit, it was wonderful seeing him so macho.
Wow, and also I got to wear clothes. I normally appear naked, so it was really nice to actually wear clothing for a change.
Disappointment for me.
Well,
But was it a hindrance during the sword fighting, the clothing?
wearing clothing? Oh, sure. It's hard to do those hops. Have you guys seen the film yet?
Yes.
Yeah, you know that hopping thing. Yeah, well, I'm very good at that, but the clothes were a little binding around the kneecaps and stuff.
Did you know how to sword fight already? Did you work with a
No, I worked with a coach to learn how to do that fencing stuff. I'm terrible at that with these little flimsy arms.
Well, we did have a little altercation in the hotel room where he'd grabbed the lamp, but otherwise, no, I think he didn't do any sword fighting.
No, that was about it.
Kermit, I assume the tattoo on the chest was the rub-on variety?
Yes, it was. Yes, I don't actually do anything like that to my own personal skin. No.
For Kermit and Miss Piggy, you've been...
What's your name, dear?
Anne.
Hello, Annie.
Hello.
I like to get close up and personal with the press.
We like that too. You've been compared to Rhett and Scarlet, and I want to know, yes, really, and I want to know how you feel about that being compared to that kind of legendary.
Oh, well, I suppose it's nice to be compared to legends, isn't it, Piggy?
Yes, but I think you're saying this kind of in a jesting way that you don't really take that seriously. And the love between Kermit and moi is truly deep felt. I think when you say Red and Scarlet, you think a pig and a frog and you laugh, but you don't. Like, will you please be quiet back there?
Somebody's working outside the door with
I'm sorry.
sledgehammer.
It's a very heartfelt thing between these two species. It's a larger love when you cross species. Just so you understand that. It's very, very deep and very, very sensitive and sincere.
What's the downside?
Right, Kermit?
Sure, whatever
Fine.
you say.
What's the downside?
The downside is always having to spend every meal with a pig.
Well,
that can be tough.
The downside is that frogs are slimy.
Wait a minute. Yeah,
But I take it, take the good with the bad.
Yeah, but pigs have very dry skin.
This is why the relationship works so well.
Do you think that this sort of interspecies love story has a certain meaning for our increasingly politically correct world?
I certainly hope not.
I think it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. What's a metaphor?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
Something I've been wanting to know for a while is where did you study French?
At the academy.
What academy was that? What academy was that?
The at Charm School.
Charm School.
Mm-hmm. In Iowa.
You went to the Iowa Charm School?
Mm-hmm. We had a Francais academy in Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Well, that explains it.
Mm-hmm. We read perfume bottles.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like working with...
What's your name, dear?
I'm Joel.
Oh, Joel. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? What was it like working
As
with...
if I care, you know?
Mm-hmm.
With the mouse?
I beg your pardon?
The mouse, now that you're working with Disney.
Oh, that mouse. Oh, Mickey and I, listen, we're members of the same society. It's the Fictional Animal Stars Union. And we've known each other for years, sure. Well, he's a very nice guy. He's kind of flat, you know? He's kind of two-dimensional. But I like him, sure.
Was he active in the production of this film? Did he show up on set? And...
No, he wasn't. He wasn't in England. No. It's hard for mice. We had a terrible time getting Rizzo into London, you know? Tough for mice and rodents to get into the country.
What was it like working with your human counterpart?
Oh, you mean Tim Curry?
Tim and...
Tim Curry wasn't Tim Curry great?
Tim was wonderful.
He was fantastic, sure.
He was absolutely darling, and his little accent, I could never understand a word he was saying.
But beyond that, he was great.
Beyond that, he was dashing. He was a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
He was everything that any other actress would like to work with. I mean, he was a dear. He was a dear person.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what he told me to say?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, Miss Piggy, you appear in this film as a kind of royal figure.
Oh, Cammy, yes, sorry.
Yes.
Back to Cammy over here.
Sorry, dear.
The boom shalak, I can't say it, but...
not many can. Go ahead.
But you seem to be comfortable in the role of queen. Is that...
Typecasting. They wanted someone to play a goddess. And of course, the only one could call for was moi. Mm-hmm.
That's sort of how it happened, yeah.
Cammy, is that it?
No, it's...
You're stunned speaking?
It seems like perfect casting.
Oh, thank you very much.
But where do you go from here?
Excuse me, Cammy's talking to me. Yes, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, next.
Well, where do you go from here? What's your dream role then?
Well, I don't have really a dream role. I like to expand myself. Between films, I go to school.
You've been going to school?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Auto mechanic is what I'm going for right now.
Yeah.
I like to expand myself, so there's no real dream role. It's just the continual, inexorable journey towards perfecting one's craft.
Well, Piggy, you.
Oh, I like that.
That was very well said.
Wasn't that good?
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Wow.
Well, Miss Piggy, you certainly have been one of the forerunners of stardom
Tammy,
for
sorry.
for people of your species, and we have another pig who's doing quite well in films now, Babe, and there's even rumblings that his movie might be a Best Picture Oscar nominee.
It's about time.
Yeah, your general thoughts about that, and do you know, Babe? Have you talked about this?
I do not. But we are one large family. When one is in a species in this world, and one is not thought of as the majority species, we all kind of pigs under the skin, as it were, and we're very pleased that one of our group could make it.
Well, what advice would you give him as someone who is coming into stardom?
Well, I don't know if I have any advice for him, except possibly just be true to oneself.
And avoid walking by butcher shops. That's probably the big one, right?
That's cute. that was cute. Well, not very funny, but cute.
For me, it's French restaurants.
We work
towards the awkward pause. That's our goal.
Getting to you guys independently of the characters you are, do people react? Do they even know who you are without your little...
What you talking about?
I have no idea. I think maybe she's not talking to us.
I have no idea.
No, I'm talking with Steve and Frank. Do people...
I still have no idea what she's talking about.
Who are they? I don't even know who they are.
All I know is that I'm very religious and I feel a strength inside me, but I have no idea what she's talking about.
That's true.
What is your name, dear?
Mari.
Mari!
Do I really want to give you...
Cam, do you have any questions?
All right, Brian, I want
Wait.
Hey, hold it, you had your shot, lady!
This is that reality thing we talked about.
Do people know you without your...
Do people know you, Maury? Without this microphone? Tell us about your life, Maury. Boyfriend, married, what? Tell me. Go for it. Stockings, eyelashes, go for it.
This is surreal.
Imagine how we feel.
But do people know you?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Do people know you, Maury? Outside of this round table here, do people actually know the real Maury?
Okay,
Stand up, Maury.
Never mind, Jeff, you go right.
You won't get there.
Brian, I'm actually going to attempt to ask you a serious question.
All right.
Okay, we'll back off.
One of the things that struck me as I was watching this film is that you've taken over metaphorically speaking, you've taken over the helm of your...
Metaphor. I knew there was something. Sorry. Excuse me. I'm backing off. I knew there was a reason for it. Go ahead.
You've taken over the helm of your father's ship, along with all of your siblings, and done an astounding job. What is that like when you're on set every day around all these creatures? I mean, a lot of people might want to, get away from their parents' shadow, as big as it was, but you've stepped into it and done an amazing job. What is that like for you?
Well, for me, it's always been a wonderful company that I grew up around, and as a kid, myself and my brothers and sisters all ended up in the studios and in the Muppet Workshop and all around it, and it was always just a wonderful place and a wonderful creative energy that was always bubbling there. I've never felt I've always considered it an honor in the last 5 years of running this company and continuing it, and I continue to always respect and love all the work that my father did. I don't feel a particular need to put some sort of stamp on it. I think I'm not inviting comparisons between my father and I, but I'm trying to continue in a direction that he was always going with the company in terms of the type of stuff we're trying to do and what we're trying to... Mostly we're entertainers, we're hopefully trying to let the world laugh a little bit. And as my father always said, maybe we can finish at the end of the day having made the world a slightly better place for what we've done. And that's what we continue to do. We always try to be innovative and do different things as well. So we're never doing the same thing again. Even when it is the Muppets, we always do something very different with them.
Did he often bring home any new puppets to try out on you guys, if you liked them? Or anything, or?
No. It was his work. I mean, it was fun. It was a wonderful atmosphere. But he worked very, very hard and long hours and so forth. And yet we always spent a lot of time with him. But a lot of how that happened was that he would bring us to the sets all the time. We were around the shoots all the time. And but it was his work. When he came home, then it was the family and the family life, and we had some of the original Muppets at home, which we destroyed very quickly in the sandbox, and then he stopped taking any home.
Is there a new Muppets TV show in development or in production?
Yeah, Muppets Tonight. We're shooting it right now. We're taping it here in Los Angeles. We've taped 5 episodes, and we're going to make 13 for this season. They go on air in March. Friday nights on ABC at 8:30. There you go. That's all of that.
I think you covered it well there.
Thank you.
Got it all in there.
And the new concept is that now the Muppets have progressed from owning and running a theater, which was the Muppet Show setup, and they now run a local TV station, K-Mupp, and Kermit is the station manager. And once a week they broadcast live to the country for half an hour, and it's the mayhem of watching the Muppets try and produce and present this half an hour of live television. It's a format that's quite close to the original Muppet Show, so that the Muppets are still allowed to be performers and have their lives behind their performances.
And you say you've done 5 now?
We've shot 5.
And when will the show debut?
March 8th is the first one.
Would it be the guest stars and like other actors and stuff?
Yeah, we're going with the idea of one major guest star per episode, and then a few little cameo walk-ins here and there. We've worked with Michelle Pfeiffer and Billy Crystal and Paula Abdul and Martin Short and Garth Brooks, and they've all been fantastic. We've had a wonderful time.
Now, for you guys, this is, you were on at night, but it was an earlier hour, so this is the first key primetime show you're going to have, isn't it?
That's true. Well, in a while.
You're talking to us?
We are.
Oh, sorry. Just nodded off there for a second.
Wake up, Piggy. Wake up. Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm not the host of the show this time. I'm kind of the station manager, and we have a new host whose name is Clifford, who you'll meet when you see the show. He's a great new Muppet. And actually, lots of new characters, along with Piggy and I, Fozzie, and Gonzo.
I'm there some of the time. I'm vastly too important now to be there all the time, of course, and I have my varied interests in life, and so I cannot be there every single show. I just try to get to the shows where there's some gangbusters men.
When you're not in auto mechanic school, I take it.
I do the automatic. Yeah. It's a correspondence course. Did I say I was going there personally?
Oh no.
Fine.
Is it exciting to you guys to be back on television?
Sure. Oh, sure.
It's très fun.
Très fun.
That's French.
I know.
Can you tell us about some of the episodes that you've shot so far and give us a preview of what we'll be seeing?
Well, I remember having a wonderful time with Michelle Pfeiffer. Unfortunately, terribly unactractive lady. Sad, isn't it?
Well,
and I gave her some tips as much as I possibly could help the poor dear. We had a wonderful time singing a song from The Sound of Music. She's a wonderful singer.
She's a wonderful singer.
Not very attractive at all.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think she's very attractive.
But a wonderful singer.
I think she's very attractive. In fact, she's one of my favorite stars.
I didn't notice.
Sure.
Really?
Very, very attractive.
I should look closer.
Also, we worked with Paula Abdul, who's also very, very attractive. You weren't there for that show, were you?
Nope.
Oh, she was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
As opposed to...
No, she's just beautiful. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how involved you guys were with the production, but there was this little problem with the Spam character.
Spam?
Yeah, that there was a certain meat company that wasn't too pleased about this.
Well, we as pigs were not pleased either, by the way. But Mr. Henson decided to go ahead with it. We all thought it was a slur on pigs, but this is something that Mr. Henson wanted to do, and he's the El Basso, He's numero uno.
You want me to have a comment on this?
You want any more slurs against pigs you'd like to do?
Well, we didn't actually mean it as a slur against pigs. We just thought
And what
it was
did
funny.
you mean? Oh.
We've been trying for months to define funny for the Hormel people, but we thought it was a good joke that the leader of the boards is named Spam, and he is still named Spam. I'm glad to say.
What is that? Are we getting a signal?
Somebody's going to kick a field goal here, I think.
Can we hear a little bit about the next Muppet movie in the works?
You better talk to Brian about that. We just go do the things.
Well, actually, we're toying with a lot of different ideas, and I'm not sure which one will be the next one. We will probably stay in a genre, in a strong genre.
That's a big word.
It's like a
horror
metaphor.
I think so, yeah.
Or science fiction or something that is again taking the Muppets to a new place. But I don't know. The next one likely will not be a classic story. It will be an original story, but in a classic genre.
Actually, what he's saying is it'll be a one-woman show. One-woman show?
It's basically
I think
the
that's
piggy.
what it's going to be.
Of course, we have to find a woman for that, of course. But,
One-woman pig show.
Oh, I see. Kind of a one-sow show. I see.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, all right, we're back.
We are.
Now, any postscripts regarding...
Yeah, I've got a few. As most Muppet fans know, the next Muppet movie, which Brian said hadn't been picked yet, it wound up being 3 years later, and that was 1999's Muppets from Space, which was the Gonzo story, revealing Gonzo's parentage, if you remember that. Miss Piggy said that the love between her and Kermit was really deep felt. I don't think that Frank Oz meant that as a pun. In fact, I'm sure of it, because doing that intentionally violates one of the Muppet rules. You never wink at the audience that the characters aren't real. But you've got to admit, him saying that their relationship was deep felt is a really good pun.
Yeah, it is.
On a sadder note, I think you and I both wanted to mention the bittersweet part is to hear our friend Cameron Turner featured so prominently. Or Cammy, as Miss Piggy called him.
Yeah.
You know, not just here, but every week on all of these interviews, we're hearing a lot of Cameron Turner. He was a great guy, a great interviewer.
Good spirit. Good spirit.
Good friend, good father. We really, really liked Cameron, and sadly, he is no longer with us. We lost him, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
But I love hearing his voice on these tapes and just hearing his personality. I mean, he had such a personality.
And it came out in these interviews as well. Very quickly, he knew how much I liked Salma Hayek back in the day, and he actually got a autograph of Salma Hayek when he interviewed her for, I don't know, maybe it was his movie called Fled, but he got a black and white photo, just had it signed to me from Salma Hayek, and he just gave it to me. I mean, he didn't have to do that. Look, that's a little, one of many little stories that add up to how Cameron was, and he was always great to us.
Yeah,
to me.
really great guy.
Yeah.
Miss you, Cam.
Miss you.
So, one last thing on the Muppets. Brian talked about the TV show Muppets Tonight, which I remember very fondly. It was so much better than their more recent ABC show. Oh, let's not even talk about that. But Muppets Tonight, lots of great gags, good guest stars, and it was wacky. It was like the original Muppet show, full of puns and silliness. And it introduced Pepe the King Prawn, who is now one of the major Muppet characters. In fact, on Muppets Tonight, he was originally part of a comedy team with Seymour the Elephant, and they had their own theme song, which I will not sing for you, but it was funny. The show also introduced Bobo the Bear, who is a continuing character for them. The show ran on ABC from March 8 to July 14th, 1996, and then they burned off all the remaining episodes on the Disney Channel for a couple of years after that. There were 22 episodes in total, and then it disappeared. You can't find it anywhere anymore. So I just want to put this out there. Get with the program, Disney. Put this out on DVD already. And also 1989's The Jim Henson Hour. I mean, seriously, we need this stuff. I don't care that it's standard def and that it's a square image. I don't think the fans care. Put it out. We want it.
Brian Henson's also, aside from the Muppet world and carrying on his dad's legacy, he's also the director of the Happy Time Murders, which stars Melissa McCarthy and Joel McHale.
Yep. So that actually brings us to the end of the part of the episode of interviewing characters, because that's all we've got. I think these were the only times we did it, unless I'm forgetting something.
I don't think so.
It was pretty rare, but very special, and I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to that. We still have a lot of time left to fill, so we've pulled a couple of other interviews. These are not filler interviews. These are actually really great interviews. The first one is a logical step from this because it's from the same movie, Muppet Treasure Island, and this is Tim Curry, who played Long John Silver in the film.
He's had a varied career. I interviewed him for Congo years ago, but that was probably the only time I interviewed him. Obviously, I wasn't part of Muppet Treasure Island. Most people know him from Rocky Horror.
Yes, Dr. Frankenfurter.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting Tim Curry stuff within this interview.
Others, of course, probably know him from Annie or Clue or
Clue.
Legend.
Especially Clue, right?
Yeah, he played Pennywise in the 1990 TV miniseries It.
Very good in that one.
The first, not the more recent It, but the original. He's also done a lot of cartoon work. He played the father in The Wild Thornberrys. He was Nigel Thornberry. And personally, my absolute favorite was when he played King Chicken on the animated Jason Alexander cartoon Duckman.
Oh, I remember you being a fan of that show way back in the day.
Duckman is hilarious. I recommend it highly. It's out on DVD. Go get it. Tim Curry has also done a lot of stage work in both London and on Broadway. He starred in Hair, Amadeus, My Favorite Year, and Monty Python's Spamalot. And also, bringing the show full circle, Tim Curry was nominated for an Emmy Award in 1994 for an episode of Tales from the Crypt. And if you want to look that up, the episode is called Death of Some Salesman, and you can find it on YouTube. Curry actually plays an entire hillbilly family. He plays 4 different roles using lots of makeup, including 2 of them are women. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's an interesting interview because you get a feel for how Curry handled his success from the Rocky Horror Picture Days, and also how he feels maybe, he's the kind of guy who steals a show in every project he's in, but you get the feeling that maybe he would have loved to have actually cinematically, that is, be a lead other than the Rocky Horror Picture. Also, I thought was interesting with the interview, what you're going to listen to, is his love for gardening, which I had no idea. So that's really cool.
Who would?
You can imagine him traveling around the world doing all these London and New York productions on stage, as well as working in Hollywood, but really finding the pull of his garden to be the ultimate thing. So that it was a really interesting aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we hope you guys enjoy it. Here's Tim Curry.
What was it like playing with all those puppets, playing to all those puppets? Kind of weird at times, or?
It's peculiar, really, because at first it's very surreal. I mean, you think, I'm standing here talking to, a bunch of felt and latex. I mean, but I think they're so much a part of the culture, and you know them. I mean, they're sort of legends in their own lunchtime, aren't they? So you don't think of them as constructs. You think of them as actually sort of as movie stars. So after like a day or two, you don't even think about it. The suspension of disbelief is kind of total. And also, about 20 years ago, I did a series in England on the life of Shakespeare, and I played him from, 19 to the end of his life. And it was at Elstree in London, and Lou Grade at ITC did it. And in the next door studio was the Muppets, which were just starting their series. So I used to hang out there all the time, because it was a more fun place to be than the Globe Theatre. And so I was sort of used to being around them, and pretty much if a Muppeteer has the Muppet on, they tend to talk to you as the character anyway, not as themselves. I mean, it seems to be a kind of discipline. So it wasn't foreign to me at all.
Even when you were sword fighting with them, because that's gotta be weird.
The sword fighting was peculiar. Not because it was a Muppet doing it, but because because it really throws the proportions out, rather, when you have a sort of human-sized sword and there's this little person with a kind of baby sword. It's quite difficult to take that seriously. The proportional thing is strange in a way because I mean, if you're a human actor in a Muppet movie, your performance tends to be either in mid-shot or close-up, because simply because of the proportional difference, which doesn't take long to get used to, but doesn't happen a great deal, and it's something that you have to think about, But also, I guess. The Muppets, by their very nature, have to be pretty animated in order to live. So, you either have to be as animated as they are, or very still. In order to keep the reality of it, and God knows, to compete.
Well, according to the production notes, it said that a number of the people got actually seasick on the boat. Were you one of them?
I didn't actually barf or anything, but it is sort of bewildering that technically this stuff can be quite difficult, because once you shoot a scene from one side, and then when you turn around, they've got to saw out half of the floor to put the Muppeteers in so that they're low enough for the Muppets to be the right height, and then you have to choreograph the humans so that in very cramped spaces, so that the not only so that the Muppets look right, but so that they can see at their feet the TV cameras, the monitors that are showing them what they're doing. So it can take quite a long time to set up. So you can be off in your dressing room for like 2 hours and then suddenly be on the Spanish Main, which, particularly after lunch, that can be quite unnerving. And at the end of a long day, it could really get to you. But I'd worked on gimbals before, because I did The Hunt for Red October, which was equally liable to make you lose your lunch.
It is interesting, because I was looking over your filmography, and it occurs to me that this is probably the only film that you've been in where you didn't manage to steal the show completely. When I think back, from your first film, Clue, which is still one of my favorite films, did you feel a sense of competition with the Muppets?
No, I think obviously I felt that I had to, you pull off the character. But one of the remarkable things, I think, about this whole company and of being part of the Muppets is that it's wonderfully non-competitive in that sense. I mean, not that people, don't want to be funnier than the next person, but that it's, most film sets are a festival of ego. And a Muppet film is remarkable for not being so. And I think this is very much the spirit of Jim Henson, and also, in a curious way, the last gasp of the 60s. Do you know? There's a very creative atmosphere, but not a competitive one. So that you feel that you really can come up with anything that if you have a good idea, it'll be listened to and either used or not. But you don't feel that kind of awful driven egos around the place. It's a marvelous place to work.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, and also the emphasis is very much on the narrative. I mean, I think they're really wonderfully written. This one in particular, because they are so. It's absolutely narrative driven. I mean, if you're not in the story, the movie fails. And at the same time, there are these kind of grace notes and moments when you completely come out of it to throw in some aside, either for adults or to undercut the very basis of the thing for a joke, and then move on. But the narrative strength and push of it is absolute, and it's a very interesting place to work.
And you get to sing. I mean, that was kind of a neat little showstopper there, and I'm wondering what that was like to to pull off, because it seemed like there was so much going on all at the same time while you're having to stay in character and sing and.
Well, they don't. You don't get to sing in films much anymore. I mean, I've done it a bit. I mean, I did Annie, which was the sort of last of those dinosaur, big American movie musicals. I mean, and fascinating to do, because of that. But one thing that we did do on this show was that, I recorded the songs and we had playback. And when we had 2 or 3 good takes with playback, I did about 2 singing live. And we used all of them.
All the live ones?
All the live ones, yeah.
Why do you think it is? Because it's interesting, because musicals haven't really done well. I mean, Music's kind of... And yet these type, with the animated features and with these little Muppet characters, they seem to do fine with musicals in them. So why do you think that they're able to do that? And
well, I think because you're kind of in fantasy land anyway. I think one of the problems with musicals now, I mean, and actually, all this sort of tribute stuff to Gene Kelly, he was saying the same thing, that people actually don't buy it anymore. People don't buy you sort of putting down your knife and fork at lunch and and bursting into song. But because the whole idea of the Muppets is so hugely based in music hall and vaudeville and variety, and it makes sense, I think, for the characters to sing, and also I think they place the songs awfully well. I also think that it's a very strong score. I think Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil did a brilliant job because it's a curious mixture of sort of pastiche Gilbert and Sullivan and sort of jolly vaudeville. And I think that all of the songs have great energy and attack, and I also think that Kermit and Miss Piggy's love duet. When I got to London, I'd been shooting on Congo for about 5 months, and I was pretty fried, and I'd just done the opening number at the Academy Awards, and the morning after the Academy Awards, I was on a plane to London to start the Muppets, and the next night I was in the studio recording the songs, and Frank Oz and Steve were recording "Love Led Us Here," the ballad, the love song duet between Miss Piggy and Kermit. And what's astonishing about it is, as they were there singing it, is that it's funny, but it also breaks your heart at the same time. And Kermit and Miss Piggy's love affair is, up there with Antony and Cleopatra and Romeo and Juliet. It's become, a sort of lodestone of romance, and I think it's terribly moving. But I was astonished while they were singing it, and that's why I think it's a brilliant song. That it's very simple and very clear, and while you think it's funny, it's also breaking your heart, and that's the area and where the Muppets operate. I think that's the great plus of kind of childhood and childlike fantasy, that anything is possible if you believe in it, and if you do it cleanly and clearly and with the sort of enormous heart that the Muppets have.
Why haven't, just for curiosity's sake, why haven't you done a Disney animated feature? Because you do all these great voices.
I do a lot of cartoons, actually. I mean, we've talked about doing them, and I just sort of, have never sort of got there. I mean, I guess, I'll probably do one in the end. Who knows? Sorry. No, but as yet, no, I haven't. I mean, I've done a lot of cartoons with them on television and stuff. I mean, I do a lot of cartoons. It's I'm an obsessive gardener, and so the way I pay for my garden is by doing cartoon voices.
What's some of the voices that you do in the cartoons?
Oh, gee.
Is there any recurring characters that you'd be like?
Oh, yeah.
DuckTales or whatever?
Yeah, well, I did a whole series of Peter Pan where I played Captain Hook, which was a sort of warm-up for Long John Silver. And I do a lot of Klasky Supo ones. I do real monsters. I do an Argentinian wasp called a Zimbo. And I do another character for Klasky Supo, and I'm trying to think what it is. I show up in these things all the time. About 13 or 14 different series, so I can't actually remember all of the ones that I do.
I'm going to just take a wild assumption and guess that probably the character that you're most recognized for is from Rocky Horror. Would that be correct?
I think it depends. For people in the street, I don't know. For the media, certainly.
How do you deal with fan recognition? Because there's something, when I told people I was going to talk to Tim Curry, it's not the same as like, maybe, like a Tom Cruise. People feel very close to you. The people that care about you really care about you deeply. How do you deal with fans who I think probably have a more internally personal relationship with you?
Well, the very height of the madness, which was a sort of year-long period at the end of the 70s, I suppose, was a bit odd. In that I was living in New York at the time, which was really where the sort of madness was based. And in fact, I was living a block behind the Waverly Theatre where it all first happened. And also when I went into Amadeus, it was very easy for people to find me because they only had to wait outside the stage door. And in fact, after a while, I had to use a different entrance. And it was funny because David Bowie was doing Elephant Man in the next door theatre. And we used to run down the same alleyway to a block up to 45th Street. So some odd people did come, the odd Satanist came out of the woodwork, and people used to go through my garbage, and that was not a lot of fun. But what actually characterizes the Rocky Horror fan, oddly and charmingly, and for which I'm very grateful, is a real kind of respect, and they don't invade my privacy, and and I think from the mail that I get, one of the reasons that they're drawn to me is not just Frankenfurter, but the kind of range of the work that I've done, and they like to see me showing up in wildly different kinds of things, and they sort of seem to like that a lot, and since that's what I like, I feel very good about it. I'm very lucky in the fan department.
But what about, and I suspect that that's changed radically, though, too, in terms of what people, I would think that the Home Alone movies, kids are reacting to you now.
I think that's certainly happened. And at airports, it's always, tiny children's jaws dropping. And I think I probably get recognized by kids as much as I do by anybody else. Supermarkets, airports.
Do they say anything?
Quite often they get sort of dragged up by their parents because they want to say something, but they're too shy to. I have a friend here, actually, whose son is about 5, and he is a huge Home Alone fan, and he calls me the boss of New York because I seem to be in charge of everything that was going on in Home Alone 2. So, and he's astonished when I show up in other films. Mommy, the boss of New York is in this one. That has made a difference. Also, whatever's on television, that whatever's just been shown on television is always. It's peculiar. Once you sort of start to get a body of work, you're never really quite sure what people are approaching you about. Particularly when Rocky Horror is like 20 years ago.
They are all different, though.
They are, yeah.
I mean, they are, but they're all.
They are, and they tend to, yeah. Well, they're all a bit left of center, yes. They tend to be, because that's more fun to play. I mean, I think the edges of human experience are probably a lot, more fun to examine.
What are you being offered? Are you getting scripts that are 180 degrees away from characters, like the absurd ones?
I'm still such a kind of festival of contradictions that they still don't know what to do with me, really. I think I still operate as a maverick, and I tend to be asked to work by maverick directors. I think I remember sort of something like 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a new agent and they looked me up in the casting directory and it said, incredibly wide range, very difficult to cast. And I think in a lot of ways that's true. I mean, I don't, in their perception. So I think that, I tend to be asked to work by directors who get it.
Do you feel that there's a role or roles that have used you better than others, that you really felt you've had to go inside yourself more, maybe pull out more, maybe you've gotten more to who you see yourself as an actor?
Well, again, I think I would say Mozart and Amadeus when I did it in New York. I mean, because he had a real kind of arc to play, and I don't think the sort of genius end of it was, called up a great deal of recognition in my part. But I think, the sort of that sort of relentless creativity, being misunderstood, was something that I identified with. I mean, in some ways, the problem, one of the things that shouldn't but does limit me is my Englishness in America. I mean, because there's that curious thing here that if you're seen to be the driving force of a great big hit, it doesn't matter anymore if you're Argentinian. You can play anything. But until that happens, if you're English, I mean, Eric Idle and I used to greet each other with butlers and villains. Butlers and villains. They're not terribly creative about that.
But the stage has offered you obviously other things. So how does that fit into your life now?
Well, I've been doing a play about every 3 years now, partly because I just, I don't want to forget how to do it. And if you stay away too long, you actually get scared. So I'm due for one pretty soon. But I've been pretty much concentrating on cameras because I want to get them right, And I also just got to a point where I was enjoying it so much more. Because there was more to discover, I think, because I spent 20 years in the theatre and mostly when I made films, I would make one at a time, and I'd already be committed to go back to England or to New York and do something in the theatre. So about sort of 7 or 8 years ago when I moved here, I came here because I wanted to concentrate on making films and understand how to work for a camera. And they don't really, make that many films in England anymore. And in a sense, I've spent more of my adult life in the States than I have in England, really. I probably think of myself as more American than British now. Just simply because I think that the culture that you exist and work in, is a huge amount of your identity.
Do you get back there?
Yes, I do. I mean, one of the nice things about making this film was that it was 3 months in London, working in London, and I hadn't worked in London for 8 or 9 years. And I hadn't made a film in England for, more than probably 10 or 11. So that was very nice, and it was the summer, and I had a really pretty mews house behind Eaton Square, and it was very, very nice to be. Although at first when I got home, but I mean I go home about 2 weeks every year to see my family and hang. Sometimes a little bit longer, but rarely more than 3 weeks. And this time, when I knew I was going to be there for a while, I mean, around every corner in London was some sort of piece of history. Some old apartment, and it was a bit haunting at first. It was strange. It threw me for a while. And then I just got back into the rhythm of London, which is a very specific one, I think.
Is it difficult then to come back here when you've been there for extended?
No, because really since Rocky Horror, I've spent so much of my working life on planes, and I for 20 years I've been working in London, Los Angeles, and New York, and I'm just used to it now. I mean, it was a huge culture shock at first, and now it's pretty much second nature.
What about their perception of you?
The British perception of me?
Yeah, of you here.
I've no idea what it is. And in fact, I'm going to do a piece for the Sunday Times soon, and it's one of the things that I'll be interested to actually ask him. Is you see, in a peculiar kind of way, I've always tried not to worry about what people's perception of me is, because I think it really gets in your way, and you can't. And in a sense, I've been protected from that because I've sort of peddled between England and the States and these two coasts so much. I don't have a sense of how Americans see me or how the English see me anymore, and I sort of lost. I don't feel that I have a kind of obvious niche in that way, and I'm sort of grateful for that. I think anything that limits you, is baggage.
Well, you may be difficult to cast, but you're working all the time. So what's coming up next for you?
Well, I'm sort of looking at a few things. I haven't sort of really decided on the next one. I took a chunk of time off after this one because I really hadn't drawn breath for about 18 months, and I was just, by the end of this one, I was really fried. So, and I'd spent very little time at home too. So I've had the gloves on in the garden for a while, and I'm just trying to sort out now what I'm going to do next.
Is that what you do for fun?
Yeah.
You garden?
Yes. Well, I think, if you're English, somewhere around 30, a trowel appears in your hand like a sort of prosthetic device, and so yeah, I'm an obsessive gardener, I'm afraid.
Tell us about the very, very first time you were ever on a stage. How old were you? What were you doing?
Well, I guess the very first time I was about 4, and it was the village Christmas show in Cornwall in England.
What were you playing?
An elf, I think.
Had your career not been successful, had you not had a successful acting career, what might you be doing with your life now?
Well, every time I get fed up with acting, I try and think of something else that I could do. I think if I was going to do anything, I would probably write. But I can't think of anything else that would interest me, or anything else that anyone would want to employ me to do.
What kind of writing? Novels, plays?
I'd love to write a novel, yes. I've sort of started on some short stories and stuff. I'm actually really getting quite interested in it now.
Well, what about the idea of, since it was very interesting to hear you talking about your career, because as much as I've loved the films that you've been in, I've always had the sense that most of them haven't really used all of your talents. What about the idea of writing, directing, something that you could do what you want to do?
Well, I'm starting to be more interested in that because, needs must, in a sense. I'd also at this point love to make a film or two in England. Simply because I think sometimes if you can get so far away from your original culture that you lose a kind of root strength, and I really recognized that when I was home doing the Treasure Island. There was a very comfortable feeling about that. Having said that, I mean, one of the things that's marvelous about making films here is that everyone's so generous with what they know. I'm a relentless kind of. I mean, I tend to be on the set even when I'm not working because I want to know what lights do, and I'm always truffling for what's going to make me better at it.
When you say that when you get fed up with the movie business, you're always thinking about things that you would do, what are the downsides of that would even cause you to think, because you're obviously doing well? Well, I mean, I would like to, it'd be nice to play somebody, intelligent and complicated, and you can spend an awful lot of time here sidestepping cardboard villains, or being given cardboard villains to play that you somehow have to, make more interesting. It's an occupational hazard for English actors here, I think.
So we have time for. Thank you. Big bad bosses.
Do you like before she walks you off? Do you like country music?
I love country music. Yes,
Who do you
indeed.
listen to and why?
Well, I love Willie Nelson. I'm a huge Willie Nelson fan, and actually, when I had a band and was touring, I loved playing the South more than anything. I mean, when somebody asked me, playing on Broadway, don't you get scared? And I said, if you've played a country club in Texas, you can play anywhere, believe me.
Thank you. Have Maury give you lessons.
And we're back. So he wasn't kidding about his music career right there at the end. We didn't mention it before, but Tim Curry put 3 albums out in the late 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s, and he even had 2 moderate hit singles on American radio, I Do the Rock and Paradise Garage. So look for those wherever 8-track tapes are sold.
Nice.
Or find them on YouTube. I actually just watched the music video for I Do the Rock, and it's pretty hilarious.
How's the song?
Well, it sounds like a song that you've never heard of from the 1970s, which is exactly what it is. But it's pretty funny. I do recommend it, especially if you enjoy him as Dr. Frankenfurter, you enjoy his singing. It's campy just like that. In fact, I understand those 2 videos get played a lot of times at midnight screenings of Rocky Horror Picture Show. They'll start with the videos and then show the movie.
Oh, very cool.
So it pairs up with it nicely because it's campy and silly just like the movie is. Now, I wasn't there at this junket, but this one almost kind of felt like a one-on-one with Mari Cartel. She
did a good job.
She did. And shout out to Mari. Nice job on this one. I think I heard Jeff Shore once or twice, but this is probably something that's worth talking about. This is something that would happen where everyone in the room would just sort of get burnt out and go brain dead. And one person would kind of have to carry it. I definitely remember this happening to me more than once. I'm sure you've had the same experience where someone would finish an answer and then we would all kind of look at each other going, I don't have anything. Do you have anything? Our eyes getting more and more frantic going, somebody ask something, please.
We'd hope that would happen at the end of the interview because then we can just call it and just say, oh, well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, we did that. We ended interviews early. But usually we would try not to, and there would be this moment of panic of, oh God, none of us have anything. What do we do? And we would be so grateful at those moments when somebody like a Bob Healy or a Maury Cartel or a Shep Morgan.
Alan Silverman.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are certain guys we could rely on, and we would know they were the ones who were going to save us. And so after that moment of looking at each other, every eye in the room would turn to Alan Silverman. Say something, Alan, please.
Yeah.
And he always did.
There were many times when I'd say to myself, oh, Bob Healy, Alan Silverman, they're at the table. Check off interview number 3 and 4. This is your downtime, Greg. You can now look at your notebook and scribble. That's horrible to say.
It was nice to have reliable people there who we knew would save your ass when those moments happened and nobody had anything to ask. Just listening to that Tim Curry interview, I could feel that. There were those pauses, those tiny little pauses where no one was asking anything. And I recognized that as like, okay, that's one of those times where everyone was kind of going, uh-oh. And thankfully, Maury Cartel was there, and she picked up the slack, and the interview was really good, and I do think we owe her a debt of gratitude for being the one on this one who did that.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to say about this one, Tim Curry said he didn't know what his next film was going to be. It wound up being McHale's Navy in 1997, starring Tom Arnold. So
that was a keeper.
Yeah. Oh, well. At least he was still working a lot in animation.
Yes. Very cool.
So, from the boss of New York to Butthead.
Yes. Last but not least, Mike Judge.
Mike Judge, who wasn't just the creator of Beavis and Butthead, he also did the voices for both of them, as well as every other male character on the show. And for the movie, he co-wrote and co-directed, and then he got Bruce Willis and Demi Moore to play the villains in the film. Now, to talk a little bit about Beavis and Butthead, I think the show got kind of a bad rap because its characters were stupid. And so a lot of people thought that the show was stupid.
Right.
And, I mean, this is a pretty common misconception. I mean, look at Keanu Reeves' career.
Right.
You know, he's never lived down doing Bill and Ted. He's actually a very intelligent guy, but people think he's stupid because he played this iconic stupid guy. I think Beavis and Butthead kind of fell into that. People thought that the show was dumb, and it wasn't dumb. The show was always smarter than its characters. Really, the show was making a statement about how pop culture was dumbing down America's teenagers.
Right. Right.
So the show knew that the characters were stupid. It wasn't pretending that they weren't. It feels like people didn't get that a lot. I mean, not everyone. The show was hugely popular, so clearly people did get it. But it was really controversial because of all these critics who were saying, no, it's so stupid. And it wasn't stupid. All they had to do was watch it and see that. And if you don't believe me, really, you just have to look at Mike Judge's other work, such as the modern comedy classic film Office Space, which he wrote and directed, or currently HBO's Silicon Valley, which he created and often directs. You know, you look at both of those and you can see how intelligent this guy really is.
Extract was flawed, but still one of Ben Affleck's best roles. He's very good in that movie.
All right.
You know, so...
Sure, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Of course, in between those, he also created the animated TV show King of the Hill,
which he references during the interview.
Yeah, it hadn't premiered yet, but it was about to. The show flew under the radar for a lot of years. It had its fans, but if you didn't watch it, it wasn't really something you paid attention to. But you might be surprised, Greg, to know that the show ran for 258 episodes.
Wow.
From 1997 to 2010.
Wow. Were you a fan of the show?
I wasn't. But I saw it occasionally. I mean, it was funny. I watched Beavis and Butthead probably more than I watched King of the Hill.
Well, this interview is very interesting because he talks about his own inspirations as an artist, and you would think from an outsider's point of view looking in that maybe he was all about animation, but this was just a way for him to break into directing cinema, live action storytelling. And
well, as we know now, because he hasn't done anything animated since then.
Right. But this is great because this interview, you actually get the seeds of his inspirations, and he's talking about how...
Yeah, he hadn't quite made the transition to live action, but you could tell that that's what he wanted.
Right, and how in high school, he was a little bit of a loner, and maybe that fueled the fire for the characters he created with Beavis and Butthead and a succession of characters. So, a really interesting interview.
Yep. Now, the television show ran from 1993 to 1997, and then it did another short season in 2011. The movie came out in 1996, and this junket was December 10th, 1996. So the TV show was still airing when the movie came out. It still had another year to go. So when he's talking about the characters, he's talking about the storylines and stuff, he's kind of talking about both, because the movie and the TV show were both going on at the time. It's actually kind of unusual to put out a movie while the show is still on. I know The Simpsons did it.
Yeah.
What's more common, I think, is you wait until the show ends and then you give it like a year or two so people miss it. And then when the movie comes out, it's an event.
Yeah, on a more superficial note, this interview is really cool. Just if you want to learn how to sound like Beavis or Butthead, Judge actually gives a little bit of how he does each voice. So that's really interesting.
He tells some great stories about how he came up with the voices, and every now and then he kind of goes into the voices. He'll do them from time to time, you'll hear. So this interview does sort of fit into this episode because we are hearing him do the voice, just like we did with the first few. So it kind of makes sense in its own way. Anyway, we've got Mike Judge now from Beavis and Butthead Do America. Enjoy.
How long has this been in development, making the movie?
Do you want to hit the air?
Yeah, you guys need
Oh.
the AC off?
Yeah.
It's kind of freezing. Let's see. The writing began sometime. Writing began sometime towards the end of last summer of '95. So it was really quick. I mean, I was still. I wrote it with Joe Stillman, one of the writers on the show, and I remember still working on the ending in January while we were recording the beginning and storyboarding. So it's a lot of intense work.
Was it a process that you think you might want to do again if they give you the chance?
Yeah, if it does well, I'd do another one. If everything else was right, you know. I'd want to do it. I'd want a little more time to do it this time. It's kind of weird. The show was on the air for so long, and then suddenly, when everyone finally agreed to do a movie and do it animated, it was like, okay, we need it in 6 months. You know, I mean, so.
Was there talk about doing it live action?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's all anyone really talked about it at the very beginning. There was offers to do a movie right after the show went on the air, like literally like 2 weeks, and those were all live action. But I think back then everyone just thought, you know, there's been Wayne and Garth, Bill and Ted, here's another one. So yeah, it was all live action talk almost.
Were there casting suggestions that you could share?
Not from anybody at a studio, but I mean, I read in the papers like everyone else, David Spade and Adam Sandler, which they would have been good. They're both funny, but no. At one point, a producer mentioned Danny Glover and Mel Gibson, but he was joking.
Speaking as someone who's never seen Beavis and Butthead on television, have you, and if so, what changes have you made to make the feature more accessible to audiences that might not be a regular television audience?
Well, I tried to make the movie something that if you've never seen the show, it still holds up and you can still, you know, find out who they are from the movie. Just, you know. So I wasn't really, you know, thinking, okay, I'll do this and that'll make women like it. You know, to me it's just, you know, just trying to show all the things about the characters that make them funny and make them who they are in a movie.
You know,
Go ahead.
You know, you do a mean Demi Moore impression. I was really quite impressed with that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh?
How'd that come about?
Well, believe it or not, someone help me out here. I'm not.
Cameo roles.
There are some uncredited cameos, and they did it. These uncredited cameo people did it just because they thought it would be fun and they like the show, and they're fans, and so they did uncredited performances. And had we wanted to, I guess it's a low budget movie, so to really be able to promote it with their names, you have to pay them more money, I guess. And but
I'm sorry.
you're welcome to guess.
Did anyone approach you that wanted to do it real bad, that you were just like, no way, no how,
Oh, the guy who delivers the water to my office, and people like that. I mean, there's like lots of just people on the street, but you mean celebrities? I guess. I can't think of any. No, I can't think of any. There was at least one whose agent approached us, and we said okay, and then changed at the last minute. But I don't remember anything like that.
I want to go back to what Paul was asking. What did you do to try and make the movie work for Paul and people who hadn't seen it?
Well, really the same thing I do with the show. I think just make it work as a movie, and make it. I mean, to me, Beavis and Butthead, just to keep it true to their characters, I think, is all that needed to be done. And sometimes in the show, because we crank out so many episodes, things slip through that to me are out of character, because they're not in my mind, they're not mean people. They're just real. They're just blissfully ignorant and just I don't know. They're not aware. They're oblivious to what's going on, and things just sort of happen by accident. It's like it's like with Clouseau when when him and Cato are going at it and trashing his apartment and crashing through roofs. It's not like a mean spirited thing. It's just slapstick. So anyways, to me, it wasn't anything I had to do. It's just keeping it true to the characters, and because I think they are likable characters if people see the right episodes or see them in the right way.
Can you talk about the genesis of the characters, Beavis and Butthead, where they came from?
Thank you.
Sure. Was that what you were going to ask?
Yeah, and I also wanted to know what inspired the names Beavis and Butthead.
Okay.
You patterned them after anybody.
Well, I started out just drawing in a sketchbook, and I was trying to draw. So I was trying to draw a guy I went to high school with, and there were about 5 attempts at it, none of which really looked like the guy. One of the attempts was Butthead, and one was Beavis. They were actually both attempts to draw the same guy. But I'd start drawing, and then it wouldn't look like him, but I'd like the way it looked, and I'd embellish and just keep drawing. So I had these guys, and then it wasn't until about a year later I did a storyboard for the first animated short, which was Frog Baseball. And I'd done a couple animated shorts before that, like 2 minutes long. And before it was actually the 4th one I did. I'd always, I've always done imitations, and I had a voice in mind, and then I would draw the character from the voice. And with Beavis and Butthead, it was the other way around. And just kind of looked at Butthead and thought, okay, what would this guy sound like? And the names, well, Butthead, I didn't have to think too hard for that one. Butthead was easy. Beavis, there was a guy at my junior high whose last name was Beavis, and was nothing like Beavis or Butthead. He was actually a football jock kind of guy, and I just remember hearing this friend of mine say, it's kind of out of the blue, say, Beavis is cool. And I just kind of said, well, why do you say that? I don't know, he's just cool. And just stuck in my mind. I don't know why. Beavis is cool. So that's where I got the name Beavis from.
Where did you go to school?
In Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Have you ever given any thought to their star sign?
Star signs? You mean their astrological signs?
And how would they fit that? You don't have to agenda here.
Oh, I don't know much about that astrology stuff. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to really say. I think I'm a Libra, October 17th. Is that what that? Is that Libra? So, boy, I don't know. I'll have to work on that one. I don't have a good answer for that.
So if they're schoolmates, then who are the other peripheral characters, the ones that we see, that they come in contact with, like the neighbor whose garage they're in?
In the movie, he's in there. All the ones in the town are from the series. The principal, McVicker, they're all in the series. The Tom Anderson guy with the camper, he's from the series. He's always been a guy that they're. He was actually one of the first secondary characters I came up with, and he was. I had a storyboard where he hires him to paint his house, and he's always been in the series. The rest of them were made up for the movie.
I know, but what I mean is, are they based on people that you know?
Oh, were they? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they, all of them. I mean, McVicker, the principal. I had a band director who, a long time ago, who I think he had a drinking problem, and he was always, in the morning, there was always this kind of sound that just came out of him. He'd just be kind of like, oh, oh, and he was always kind of shaking, and so that's where that came from. And Tom Anderson is, I knew a bunch. There was a guy on my paper route when I was a kid that talked like that. The guy across the street from us that had that voice. Yeah, they're all based on, either on several different people or, a couple.
You talked about doing impressions when you were young. I imagine, as you talk now, that perhaps you weren't really doing impressions of famous people, but maybe of the neighbors and the teachers.
Yeah, I never did famous people. When I was a senior in high school, I think that's when I peaked in my impression abilities. And I actually, at that time, I could do almost the whole cast and Leave It to Beaver. That was back before, and I could do a lot of the My Three Sons characters. But I did, my teachers. I imitated my mom. I used to imitate, there was a guy in Albuquerque, Don Lessman's Music Center, and he had local commercial. I did a lot of local commercial imitations.
Can we hear the imitation of your mom?
Oh, God. This is going on radio. Oh, boy. It's not very funny if you don't know her, Maybe I'll break into it later when I'm telling a story about her or something.
But now that the whole world is doing impressions of these characters, but unfortunately they're not doing it very well. I mean, it's more than just a hobby.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give? How do you get these characters right?
Well, in parts of the movie, for example, the scene in Congress where I had a group of people and I was trying to get them to do a butthead kind of laugh, people always, for the butthead laugh, the way they always do it, the mistake people always make is they start kind of wanting to go like or ha ha ha, and I find myself saying, it's kind of like singing, go from the diaphragm and kind of like like let it sort of come out of you, and I was feeling it was kind of ridiculous. I was with these people, and just kind of like think HUH, and it's like I'm teaching yoga or something.
When you look back at this, when you look back at your life and you're teaching people how to do this, that's got to be like the strength. How do you rationalize?
Boy, I try not to think about it because it gets kind of scary. But I don't know. Yeah, it's really weird when I think, okay, this is what I do for a living. I'm in here with, a sound engineer, and I remember at one point putting together all the Cornholio stuff and I'm kind of listening to it. It's John Bowen, the sound editor, and myself were sitting there, and there's a microphone. I'm going, okay, think right here, you know, we need him to say, like, make some noises and then say bunghole, bunghole, bunghole. You know, it's really, boy, it's weird. I don't know. I want to just not think about it because it's a strange thing to be doing for a living.
Did you go from one character to the other? Did you get Butthead down and then like modify him in terms of the voice to Beavis, or vice versa?
Well,
what is the difference?
The way I started, originally I didn't want to do the voice of Beavis. I did Butthead first, and Beavis, all I really had for him was a laugh. There was a guy at my high school, wasn't anything like Beavis. He was a straight A student, but he used to sit in the front of class, and anytime the teacher made any kind of little joke, he would just kind of go, he'd be biting his lip a lot and kind of go, and I used to imitate him in high school, and so I'd been doing that, but I didn't really have a voice, because the guy didn't talk like that, he just laughed like that. So then I started thinking, well, when he talks, I'll have him talk like he laughs, so I kind of had this gravelly, you know, and initially I thought, well, I can't have him talk like that, that's too, no one really talks like that. But then I thought, well, there's that Froggy on the Little Rascals who kind of talked that, so I just had him kind of talk high and gravelly and like, you know, like he's just kind of just hyperactive. And Butthead, I just kind of looking at him with his, I figure a person with braces kind of, like I had braces, and you sort of, you don't want to let your cheeks scrape on those wires, you know, so you kind of, you end up forming your words like, whoa, that was cool. You know, kind of, yeah, hey, Beavis. You know, it's kind of like you don't want to let you kind of do this. And I animate his mouth that way, too, you know. So that came about really because of his braces, I guess.
Mike, you've
How
probably
do
been
their voices
amused.
suit their characters, each individually?
Well, Beavis, you know, he's high-strung, and so he's kind of like, you know, it's Beavis has ended up being more fun to do, you know, because he can just fly off the handle and have a wider range of emotion, if you will. And Butthead is just kind of laid back, and so it kind of, you know, just kind of, I actually, here I go talking like I'm a yoga guy again, but I kind of have to, like, really, it's like relax to do it, you know, I gotta, like, you know, let it just kind of bounce out for it to sound right.
Like I've read that you had based the Cornholio character on your own experiences with eating a lot of sugar and chasing your sister around. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, but when I was a kid, you know, really bored in the summer or whatever, I would follow my sister around the house, and my brother too, just talking in this foreign accent. I don't know where I got it from. I think it started, remember the first time I did it was just on some god-awful family vacation where we're all in the back of the station wagon, and I think I got a lot of it from a tourist I had heard talking, I think was from Pakistan or something, and then also the Harry Belafonte albums and Perez Prado albums my parents listened to. So I don't know. I actually have a tape of it, that I recorded myself talking in this accent, interviewing her, and it's a lot like Cornholio, and I discovered it, you know, after, in a box, after, you know, I had already done all this.
Like, there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of articles written about the cultural significance of Beavis and Butthead, especially, you know, when the show was getting the hours changed around and everything. You know, just brilliant nihilism or the end of civilization as we know it. What have been some of your favorites? How do you view it in the cultural perspective?
Well, I don't know. I kind of think it's not my job to think about those things, and I try not to. But I don't know. Some of it I think gets a little ridiculous. I was reading. I mean, when I don't think they're a voice of a generation. I mean, I was when that ended up, that kind of all got inflated. When Rolling Stone put them on the cover, I was actually in the office when they were, because I was talking about drawing the cover, and they were saying, well, we were thinking of putting Beavis and Butthead, the voice of a generation, ha ha ha. So it was just a joke, you know. And so the way it got laid out on the cover, it says the voice of a generation, and ha 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 is kind of written down below. And so all of a sudden it was like, you know, all these journalists saying, oh, they're being called the voice of a generation, and they're idiots. Oh, what does this say about our future? And it's like, you know, they're not the voice of the generation. It's just a funny little show, you know. So that got a little out of hand. I mean, sometimes I'll start reading one of those, you know, articles where it's someone really psychoanalyzing the whole thing, and some of it I go, yeah, that's kind of true, you know, and it's almost like I feel like I'm going to a shrink myself, which I could probably use. But I try not to think about it a whole lot.
But in the paper this morning, there was you won some kind of a court case.
Oh, yeah, God, I'm surprised that made the papers. Must have been a slow day.
What was that all about?
Oh, I think it's okay for me to talk about now. Just this guy, you know, one of many. I don't know if this happens to everybody or if just something about Beavis and Butthead. There's a lot of people out there who think it was their idea. This guy basically was saying that he was drawing Beavis and Butthead in his home in 1991, and I showed up at the door and stole the idea from him. And this was in a place out here in California, I think Chatsworth, and I lived in Dallas at the time. It's basically no case, but he got a lawyer to take it, and it got thrown out. So in the meantime, I had to go dig up all my phone records and all this stuff. But yes.
Okay, prize.
What's that?
Okay.
Nope.
Can I ask you a little bit about, I mean, it's not surprising that a lot of the young kids who watch MTV really took to Beavis and Butthead, but can you talk about the guys in their 30s that also, I mean, you have a range of people from like 10 years old to 30s that enjoy the show.
It even goes into, I've said this in a lot of interviews, but I get a lot of letters from women in their 50s actually. And I don't know if it means that there's a lot of women in their 50s who like the show, or it's just that the ones who do like it think they're the only ones, and so they feel like they have to write. But it's, I think we found in the test screenings that it goes more female than anyone thought. I always kind of suspected that there were, I mean, I was taking, my younger daughter had to have a minor little operation where they put a tube in the tear duct where they had to put her under, and I was really stressed out about it and nervous, and the anesthesiologist comes out and just saying, yeah, I just really wanted to meet you, I'm a big fan, I've taped all the episodes, and kind of going, oh, that's great, wait a minute, what does this say about the anesthesiologist here? I don't know, but there's actually quite a few doctors. I always hear something, you know, the composer on the movie, John Frizzell, his wife is an opera singer and was just over in Israel and said a lot of opera singers are really into Beavis and Butthead, and you know, like Bernardo Bertolucci is a big fan, and you know, every month or so I hear about someone who likes it. That's always, and nothing surprises me anymore. And you know, I think it's broader than people think.
Possibility of crossing over to mainstream TV.
You mean like a network, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't, to me, it'd be hard to tame it too much and make it, I mean, if you suddenly had episodes where Beavis and Butthead learn a life lesson at the end of the episode, and, you know, Beavis says, you know, Butthead, I just haven't been a good friend to you lately. You know, it's like it just wouldn't, that wouldn't please anybody, I don't think. Wouldn't please the fans or the non-fans. So on TV, it's probably going to always be where it is, I think.
What is the future of the show on TV? What kind of deal?
I have one more season left on my contract. There's going to be 2 more seasons with me doing the voice, you know, that are going to be done. After that, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. Seems to me I would rather not keep going with, you know, episode 250 or whatever. You know, rather do something different with them. It depends on how the movie does. If it does well, I wouldn't mind doing more movies or doing something different with the characters. I don't know.
What about other series altogether? I mean, I've been asking you, well, what else have you got up your sleeve?
Yeah, well, I have many other things up my sleeve. So there's a show on Fox coming out today called King of the Hill that I collaborated with Greg Daniels, the Simpsons writer, and that's coming out in January.
What's that about?
The easiest way to describe it, the Tom Anderson character in Beavis and Butthead, it's kind of like those type of people, a little younger, and but that's Greg Daniels has been running that, and while I've been doing the movie, that comes out in January. There's also I had a character called Milton. It was the first cartoon I ever did that I still would really like to do something with, and Fox is interested in doing something like a live action feature with him as a secondary character. So I'd like to. I always wanted to try live action. That's really what when I was doing my animated shorts. That was my plan after I finished the Beavis and Butthead short, was to maybe do another one and take the money and do a live action short and try to get into that. So.
What about the scheduling problems? Because we've seen in the past that animated shows are impossible to turn out as fast as you turn them out. How do you do it?
Well, we were. it was late at the beginning, and a lot of that was executives and people. Well, network, people who weren't accustomed to animation, people at MTV weren't used to it. No one, and I'm sure it was the same with The Simpsons. People, no matter how many times you tell someone, you can't animate a show as fast as you can do live action. They don't understand. They're like, well, what about more money? Well, why can't you? Are you lazy? It always comes down, and it's just a matter of money and time. It's nothing else, It's so. But we've once the show, God, with Beavis and Butthead, it's never slowed down really. I mean, after it was a success, we were racing to get the rest of the first season out, then racing to get season 2, and it's just never slowed down. It's gotten easier because there's more people doing it now, and then as soon as it looked like it was going to slow down, the movie happened, and then it was like 2 years worth of work in 1 year. But that's, it's just animation. That's the way it is.
What were you like in school? And how do you think other kids perceived you?
Oh, I was just a skinny little wussy. I had a rough time. I went to a junior high. Junior high was really bad. I was there was some racial tension, and I was a shiny blonde-haired, shiny white-toothed, skinny little weirdo, and the perfect target to venture hatred towards the white man, the gringo. And I don't know. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. I guess that awful, but it was about the worst time of my life, was being, from 13 to 16, I guess. And I mean, I was kind of a nerdy kid, really. I played in the symphony. I was like a science student.
Is there any of Beavis or Butthead in you, or vice versa?
Yeah, I guess. I tried to deny it at the beginning, but this old roommate of mine caught up to me after the show was on the air, and he was saying, I read these interviews where they say you're nothing like your characters, but when I watch the show, I tell people, man, Butthead, that's Judge right there, that's him. But I mean, I was in college, especially, when you're studying physics, it's like, we would get to the state where I would just, you're done studying and you're just like vegging out, and it just kind of, I would start putting the word butt into everything. Just like say, let's go to Butt Donald's and get some butt fries. So I think that's, but, and Beavis, like I said before, is kind of similar. Beavis around Butthead is kind of like the way I used to be around my brother, at least when he's trying to irritate him. Like I used to just say things to irritate my brother or just keep talking while they were watching TV. So, I mean, there's little things like that.
Why don't you tell us one of your mom's stories? We're getting ready.
Oh, geez, I don't know. My mom, let's see. She says, well, Mike has, he's in this band. A lot of his faces that I can't really, I better not do this. I'm going to get in trouble.
Were there any ratings problems with this?
We had to take, believe it or not, there was more, Tom Anderson said whacking off about 3 more times than he does in the version he saw. We had to take that was the main thing. We had to curb the whacking.
Three whacking off is a PG and 6 is
It's like a barter system.
Very quickly, Rob Zombie, he did some work on the hallucination scene.
Yeah, that was his artwork. Yeah, that we based that on. Just this. Who is this from? Oh.
Just sign your name on it.
Okay. Oh, good. That's always easy.
And then he signed some autographs, and then he left. The end. The Mike Judge story.
Yes.
So when he talked about how Fox liked his animated short film and the character of Milton, and he said that they wanted him to do a live-action project with Milton as a secondary character, what he's talking about there is Office Space. And in the movie, Milton is played by Stephen Root. But the character was originally the star of a series of cartoons that he did. And I actually saw these, I think, back in the late 80s as part of Spike and Mike's animation festival. They would tour with all these animated shorts, and I would go and see them. Milton was one of the ones that I saw. I think it also aired, what was it, Saturday Night Live? Or, I don't know. It aired somewhere else. But the character of Milton was very nerdy, and he was upset that management had taken his favorite stapler, and he would mumble threats about setting the building on fire. And it's kind of funny to remember that this classic movie, Office Space, which everyone now loves, was spun off from this one minor character that Judge had made some cartoons about years earlier, and Mike Judge had done the voice for it. And, Office Space isn't about Milton. He's kind of off in the background. But, if you've seen the movie, you remember him.
Yeah, big part of it. Yeah, of course.
So the last thing I want to do, I took a little section of this interview and I made you guys a present. So, hey, check this out.
Bunghole, 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 bunghole.
It's your new ringtone. You're welcome.
That was not the gift I was expecting. Not the gift.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, dude.
Yeah.
Well, that ends another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Next time, wait. You probably don't know what next time is, but I'm going to show you.
Don't surprise me.
You can do it.
The next episode, folks, ladies and gentlemen.
I do.
Is Apollo 13. It's an interview that I definitely was at.
Wow.
And you were there too, Matt.
Yeah, I remember.
It was an out-of-town press junket, Apollo 13. That was when we...
Houston.
It was in Houston?
Houston, Texas.
Oh.
Remember we went to the Space Center?
We did? Was it based on a true story? No,
weren't you just saying you remember this
one? I remember. I believe I have old photos.
And they forced us to see the movie Babe, and nobody wanted to go, but then we all loved it.
Right. Okay, Apollo 13
is put us on a bus. This has nothing to do with the junket, but this is spouting off our memories.
So, listeners, the next episode, get ready. Episode number
10.
10 will be Apollo 13.
Yes, and this will be another two-parter because we interviewed a lot of people, and it's not going to fit under one show, so it's going to be actually episode 10 and 11. So we hope you'll check that out. In the meantime, of course, here's our usual spiel. Our webpage, mattandgregpodcast.com. Our Facebook page, facebook.com/mattandgreg.
Please give us your feedback on the show. Do you think it's too long? Do you think it's too short? Do you think Matt's too intelligent for me? Do you think I'm an idiot? All these wonderful topics, please. We'd love to hear your feedback on the shows. Or maybe if there's a movie from the 90s you want us to cover on a future episode, we may have it as well. Who knows?
It's possible. And we may ignore all of those requests and just do whatever we want.
So from me, Matt, and Coolio, we will see you next time with Apollo 13.
Yep. See you then.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.